Hey, what's up guys, it's your boy KCM What Ifs. Today we are gonna be reading The Turn of a Hero, or What If Naruto Left Jiraiya and Betrayed Konoha. So sit back, relax and enjoy. If there was one thing that Kabuto did not like in this world, no, despised would be the better word, it would be a surprise. He just didn't like the aspect that word brought. And who would? Well, in his mind at least. Seriously, to be caught off guard by something that you would never expect? And sometimes even for the amusement of some people. Like birthday surprises. Now there was one thing that Kabuto did not like in the slightest. Maybe it had to do with the fact that he never really did have the chance to experience one. Talk about a childhood. But the surprise that he was currently experiencing was certainly in the top 3 most hated ones. And it wasn't anywhere near a birthday surprise. Not only that, but he was also very much pissed at life in general at the moment. Why? He really didn't know. He just was, period. I can't really tell you just how much I have waited for this moment, stated Naruto as he took a single step forward, which caused Kabuto to take a step back. Ever since that day in Yuzu, I've been wanting to pay you back. Naruto then shrugged. The only downside will be that Mito won't be able to add her own punishment that she had in mind for you. But beggars can't be choosers. Kabuto simply readjusted his glasses as he looked at Naruto while keeping both Itachi and Sasuke in his peripherals. You make it sound like you've already won, and that I stand no chance here. Naruto chuckled. That's because that's exactly what I'm saying. I alone would have been able to take care of you. But it seems that both Itachi and Sasuke here want a shot at you as well. Call it me doing my part in this group, said Itachi from Naruto's side. One which will benefit the whole group and not just one person, he added while glancing at Sasuke for a moment. Welcome aboard, simply said Naruto in response. Kabuto then brought his hands together. Already knowing what he was trying to do, Naruto was in front of the snake skin-covered individual, swinging the Saikatsu Gakari towards Kabuto's head. Kabuto jumped back the moment before the sword's blade could come in contact with his neck, lest he be beheaded. Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise. And here I thought that you couldn't actually fight. Kabuto chuckled. I prefer not to, really. But it's something that cannot be avoided at times, no matter how much I dislike it. It would be wise if you don't kill him, said Itachi from his position in a calm tone. And why is that? Asked Naruto without looking at him. If you do, then the Edo Tensei will not be dispelled, meaning that I'll be stuck here forever, answered Itachi. Naruto chuckled at hearing that. You don't have to worry about that, Itachi. I have my own way of ending this jutsu of his so that you'll be able to leave this world just like you desire. And not see what happens to the village. He finished in his mind. But it was too late for that. On his way here, Itachi had already looked at what state Konoha was currently in. And while it pained him, he knew that this outcome would have been unavoidable at the end. His only choice was to make Kabuto undo the Edo Tensei so that he would be able to finally leave the living world without looking at that sight ever again. But Itachi didn't say any of this out loud. He simply looked at Naruto's back with a curious look. Just what did Naruto mean when he said that he had his own way? It must be the Rinnegan, thought Itachi. It was the only way that he could think of. But Sasuke wasn't about to let Naruto have all the fun either. Kabuto immediately jumped upwards towards the ceiling of the empty hideout, using his chakra to stick to it. The reason for this being Sasuke having shot one of his Susanoo arrows at Kabuto. Since Naruto had been in front of Kabuto, he too had jumped and was now standing in the ceiling as well. Oi, team, watch where you shoot those things, would you, said Naruto in slight irritation. Sasuke merely smirked. If you couldn't even dodge that, then you don't deserve to be calling the shots. Aren't I right? Itachi shook his head slightly at that. Still with that rivalry of theirs, eh? Some things never change. Am I in the way of your lover's quarrel, said Kabuto with amusement. Naruto looked at him with his own amusement present in his Rinnegan eyes. That should be my line. After all, that's Snake and you seem to be pretty close. Kabuto's amusement disappeared completely upon hearing that. Of course, Naruto was referring to the snake that Kabuto always had at his side. Kabuto then shook his head. Enough with the games. You said that you wanted to kill me. Well, here I am. I'm not stupid to fall for one of your tricks, retorted Naruto as he extended his left arm towards Kabuto. Why don't you come to me? Bansho Tenin. Kabuto scowled as he felt himself being pulled forward towards Naruto. I'm not going down that easy. Sanaijeshu. Naruto brought the Saikatsu Gakari in front of him, preventing the summoned snakes from reaching him. Kabuto for his part used the Saikatsu Gakari to his own advantage. He brought his feet forward and used the sword's blade as a means to propel him away from Naruto. Kabuto was immediately on the defensive again, however, as Itachi appeared behind him, delivering a fast-speed combo of punches and kicks. Kabuto grunted in pain as Itachi landed a hit on his lower stomach with one of the kicks. Seeing this, Itachi prepared to use this momentum to his advantage only for Kabuto to disappear as a couple of snakes took his place. Kabuto reappeared in front of the still unconscious Anko, holding his stomach in slight pain from Itachi's kick. Fighting Itachi in taijutsu is not a good idea, thought Kabuto in frustration. He then tilted his head to the left in order to dodge the incoming Saikatsu Gakari that was thrown by Naruto. Don't forget about me, stated Naruto as he landed next to Itachi. Kabuto chuckled at him as he made to grab the thrown Saikatsu Gakari that was now implanted on the ground next to Anko. Well, now you've made a mistake. Because this sword will now be dash. He didn't get to finish his sentence as crimson energy erupted from the Saikatsu Gakari which prevented him from grabbing it. Hell, he had to step back in order to not get hit by the seeming wild energy that was emanating from it. The crimson energy, however, seemed to not harm the unconscious Anko in the slightest. It was Naruto's turn to chuckle at him. Sorry for you, but that sword chooses who will be its wielder. And it looks like it doesn't like you very much. Itachi's interest piqued at hearing this. Is that sword sentient? He wondered. Now that was handy. It reminded him of Kisame and the Samahata. Kabuto frowned at hearing that. Well, that sucked. Fire style, Hozenka. The snake that was also beside Kabuto quickly wrapped itself around him, completely protecting him from the fast and small fireballs that were shot by none other than Sasuke. Naruto smirked slightly, not that Sasuke could see as he was standing behind him and Itachi. And here I was wondering when you were actually going to do something. Sasuke didn't respond. The crimson energy created a barrier that shielded Anko from getting hit by any of the fireballs. No doubt on Naruto's orders it was doing all of this. Fighting the three of you is really a hassle, stated Kabuto as the snake unwrapped itself from around him. Even I have to say that I can't handle it. Tough luck, retorted Naruto, because we're not letting you summon any more of those shinobi in your collection. Really, that would just be a pain in the ass. But you're also not running away like usual, continued Itachi, which makes me wonder as to why that is. Kabuto's silence was the response that Itachi received. It's that woman behind him, said Sasuke as he walked forward until he was standing beside his brother and Naruto. That curse mark that she has, that is what you were after, isn't it? Kabuto narrowed his eyes on Sasuke. And how would you know that? Sasuke shrugged. I didn't. I was just taking a guess. But it seems that I was right after all. Oh, so that's what you wanted, said Naruto in realization. I was wondering as to why you even bothered to capture Anko in the first place. But there is one more question though, what are you planning on doing with her curse mark? I was going to use its chakra to empower me, Kabuto answered, not bothering to hide what his intentions were. I was going to do it before you three arrived. But now. You're not getting the chance to. Kabuto's eyes widened as he heard Naruto's voice coming from behind him, as well as feeling a wave of pain hit him throughout his whole body. Naruto was behind Kabuto with the Saikatsu Gakari in hand, having used it to stab Kabuto in the chest. But then Naruto raised an eyebrow as he noticed that his sword had stabbed something liquid instead of something solid. "Say hello to one of my modifications," stated Kabuto as his chest area was liquid-like for the moment. "That's Suigetsu's power," muttered Sasuke upon seeing this. "So those are your intentions," thought Itachi in realization as his Susanoo sprang to life around him. Naruto then chuckled. "Something like this won't stop saving you, you know. It looks like you don't know what my Saikatsu Gakari is capable of, do you?" Kabuto didn't know what he meant by that until he felt even more strength leaving him. Not understanding what was going on fully, Kabuto still knew that he was in a bad position. Naruto retracted his sword and jumped back as multiple snakes appeared around Kabuto, intent on bringing down Naruto. "Almost there," thought Naruto as he landed. "Just what is that sword?" wondered Kabuto as the wound that was caused by the Saikatsu Gakari healed in a matter of seconds. "It felt like my strength was being taken away, but not physically, but spiritually. Weird, or was it? Yasaka no Magatama." The snakes that were surrounding Kabuto shot to the ceiling, using their sharp fangs to stick to the ceiling and bringing Kabuto along with them in order for said individual to not get hit by Itachi's attack. "This guy is a real pain in the ass," thought Naruto as he looked up at Kabuto. "Then do something about it," said Kurama with a roll of his eyes. "You don't have to tell me that twice." Naruto placed the Saikatsu Gakari on his back as he walked towards both Itachi and Sasuke, all the while keeping Kabuto in sight. "How about for a triple attack?" said Naruto as he stopped in front of both Uchiha brothers, looking up at Kabuto. "With pleasure," was Sasuke's answer as his Susanoo appeared around him. Itachi merely nodded his head, signifying that he agreed. "Water style, Suryuden." Naruto's own Susanoo erupted into life, surrounding the said silver-haired individual, and used one of its swords to split the water dragon that was made by Kabuto in half, making it die off right then and there. "So the power of his Susanoo lies in those swords of his, does it?" thought Itachi as he looked at Naruto's Susanoo for the first time. Kabuto was also thinking of the same thing at the moment. Seeing Naruto's Susanoo readied its swords, both Itachi and Sasuke prepared themselves as well. "Enkaku no Kenshirashu. Yasaka no Magatama. Enten, Yasaka no Magatama." Kabuto could only watch as the three attacks by Naruto and the Uchiha brothers were fired and sent at him at an incredible speed. The end result? A big explosion that shook the whole area, both underground and on the surface. In the forest surrounding the village of Konoha, the battle between the Aim Shinobi and the samurai continued on to its climax as both Han and Rashi transformed into their perfect Bija mode. Mito could be seen running towards where Konoha stood, killing or heavily injuring any samurai that came her way with the kunai still in hand. "I don't have time for this," she thought to herself in impatience as a small group of 5 samurai came at her with their swords in hand. She was ready to take them down when someone landed in front of her. Water style, Ja no Kuchi. The 5 samurai could only curse as a column of water in the form of a snake impacted them, sending them floating back and forth. Mito rolled her eyes at the person in front of her. "I could have taken care of them, you know." Fuka simply looked back at Mito and sent her fellow redhead a wink. "Just trying to be helpful is all." Mito chuckled slightly before turning serious. "We need to get a move on. I'm not sure for how long Rashi and Han will be able to stall the Tsuchikage and his army. We're not going to be able to handle this alone," stated Fuka as she and Mito took off running once again. Aim Shinobi aren't as well trained as those from IWA. Not to mention the fact at how much larger of a number of shinobi that they possess that is only rivaled to that of Kumo. "It can't be helped," replied Mito with a small sigh. "But don't forget that we also have Kiri on our side as well." Fuka didn't respond to that. The only bad thing at the moment was the timing of everything occurring. If only Naruto had been more patient, then Mito would not be so impatient right now. Really? Were all Uzumakis like this? But then again, she was also an Uzumaki. Well, she had her answer right there. Both redheads stopped on their tracks as a small squadron of IWA shinobi appeared in front of them, stopping them from advancing. So they've already reached our position, thought Mito with a frown. Things were not looking so good right now thanks to this. There was no way that the AIM shinobi that she had brought with her would be able to handle the IWA shinobi. Not to mention the fact that they had already been fighting the samurais for a while now as well. In the next moment before the IWA shinobi in front of them could attack, a giant white hoof came down on them from behind both female Uzumaki, squashing the IWA shinobi and instantly killing them in that moment. Mito could only smirk as she looked up behind her to see the gobi. "Thanks for that," said Mito in gratitude. The gobi simply lowered his head, signifying that he wanted for them to climb on top of it. Mito did so instantly while Fuka did so a bit reluctantly. "Whoa!" exclaimed Fuka as the gobi raised his head back to its full height again. Looking behind her, Fuka could see the form of the Yonbi fighting through wave after wave of both IWA shinobi and samurai, with the shinobi from AIM cheering him on. "All right," began Mito before she pointed in the direction of Konoha, "let's go." Before the gobi could move an inch, one floating Inoki appeared in front of them. Mito smirked at him. "Well, if it isn't an old fossil. You have some nerve to be here, I'll give you that much." Inoki simply humphed at her with his arms crossed. "You don't scare me in the slightest, Uzumaki. And neither does Yandame's son for that matter." "Age must be getting to him then," muttered Fuka. "Really, what else could it be? His ego perhaps. It was obviously bigger than his whole body combined." "Really, Inoki. You're just a fool that has lived for far too long," said Mito with a sigh. "But seeing that you want to continue to get in our way, it will be my pleasure to finally send you to the afterlife." Inoki snorted at that. "I really don't care what happens to Konoha. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to profit from this once this is all over. So I really should thank you and that brat for doing all of this. But what you're planning on doing afterwards, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to." Fuka chuckled, catching one's attention. "Well, I'm pretty sure that you could if you wanted to. After all, you have two of them." Mito shrugged. "She's right, you know." But Inoki didn't take the bait. "Enough with the games. Once I have killed you and brought both of my Jinchuriki back with me, I'm going to kill that Uzumaki brat and take the Kyubi back with me as well." Mito raised an eyebrow as she heard this. "Quite the ambitious little man, aren't you?" "I am what I am," replied Inoki before he brought his hands forward in order to shield himself from the impact from the gobi's head, making the gobi stop dead in his tracks. "We're not coming back with you," stated the five-tailed horse. Inoki frowned. "We'll see about that. My shinobi will soon rip yours apart," he stated while looking up at Mito. Mito smirked at him while she pointed behind her towards the rampaging Yonbi. "We'll see about that." Seeing this, Inoki could only scowl. No matter, he would wrap things up here before he did the same with Rashi and his bijou. That was before he saw something that made all of the confidence that he had at this point disappear in a matter of a single second. And that was the emergence of a giant six-tailed slug in the middle of the battlefield next to the Yonbi. "What the dash?" Mito smirked. "So it seems that they've finally arrived, have they?" Concentrating further, Inoki could see the appearance of Kiri shinobi, who began to enforce the weary AIM shinobi as well as the Yonbi. But it still didn't matter. Even with Kiri dash. Fire style, Gokakyu. Inoki immediately flew backwards and away from the gobi and the two female redheads in order to dodge the fireball that was shot at him. Mito simply closed her eyes as someone else appeared besides her and Fuka. "So, you hadn't arrived until just now, had you?" One Uchiha Mikoto smirked as she ran a hand through her long black hair. Nope, not until now at least. I do apologize for the delay though. Before Mito could respond, someone else landed in front of them. Mikoto grinned at the newcomer. It seems that you're even more late than me though. Aren't I right, Kushina? One Uzumaki Kushina simply chuckled. Yeah, I guess so. Well, it seems that we're all here then, said Mito with a small smile before she looked at the now angry Inoki. You've now lost, old man. You chose the wrong side, and now you will pay for it. And true to her words, the tide on the battlefield was now going in their favor as Kumo shinobi accompanied by the Raikage appeared, completely fighting back the Iwa shinobi as well as the samurai. Using this to their momentum, both shinobi from AIM and Kiri began their attack like there was no tomorrow. Inoki could only grind his teeth together in barely restrained anger. You. It's our time now, interrupted Kushina as she along with the two other female Uzumakis and the one female Uchiha prepared herself. The Gobi merely looked at the Tsuchikage in indifference. Well, this turned out to be a very bad day for one small man. And that was an understatement for the century. One mint-haired girl could be seen running and hopping from rooftop to rooftop through the village of Konoha near the Hokage mountain. So far, she has encountered little resistance. It seemed that all of the major fighting was occurring near where Yujito and B were fighting at the moment. Which was a good thing for her as far as she was concerned. And what was her destination? She really didn't know. All she could hope for was to run into Niji by random chance. Not a very good plan, you might say. Well, she never really was one for being a thinker at any rate. Fu then landed on a rooftop in front of the Hokage building, the Hokage mountain standing behind it. The reason she stopped was the fact that the building was surrounded by multiple umbu as well as on top of its rooftop. Well, this sucks, thought Fu as she took a step back. Fighting umbu was something that she was not in the mood for right now. Or well, ever really. You really are careless. Fu immediately turned around and kneed whoever had said that straight at the person's jewels. Said unfortunate person happened to be none other than one Hyuga Niji who was on his knees the next moment with a pained look on his face. Seeing who it was, Fu gasped as she kneeled in front of him with an apologizing look. Niji, I'm so sorry. But you just can't startle me like that. Lesson learned, said Niji through the pain that he was currently feeling. As Fu helped Niji to his feet, the umbu from the Hokage building were suddenly around them entirely, surrounding them. You too, don't move, said the one in front of the gathered umbu that was standing in front of both Fu and Niji, who they also assumed to be the leader. Looking around, Niji counted about 12 umbu present even through his current pained state. Before they could do anything, however, another individual landed on the rooftop behind the umbu that had spoken. Shinra Tensei. The umbu and those near him were blown back off the rooftop and towards the streets below them. Both Fu and Niji brought their hands to their faces to shield themselves from the shockwave from the attack. The remaining umbu were then on the move towards the individual who simply brought his gun by that was strapped on his back forward, swinging it towards the umbu and sending powerful gusts of winds that sent them flying just like their teammates had been just a moment before. One Uchiha Madara placed his weapon on his back again as he looked at both Fu and Niji. You two need to be more careful. Niji raised an eyebrow at him. And who exactly are you? Call me Uchiha Madara. Both Fu's and Niji's eyes widened as they heard this as well as Komi's. Fu raised a shaking arm, pointing it straight at him. Just how dash. Madara shook his head as he turned away from them. Don't worry about it. I already know that you're with Naruto, so you have nothing to fear from me. But please put on a good show for me if you will. With that, Madara jumped off the rooftop and landed on the now vacant rooftop of the Hokage building, sitting down with his legs crossed and placing his gun by down next to him. Both Fu and Niji looked at him with a questioning look. Just what did he mean by when he said to dash? Niji. Oh, so that's what he meant. Both Fu and Niji turned around to face the direction of where Fu had come from to come face to face with Lee and Tenten. Shit, thought Niji. He was not looking forward to this at all. Both Lee and Tenten landed in front of them, both with an angry look on their faces. Just what do you think you're doing, Niji? Screamed Tenten in anger. Lee was silent, awaiting the answer from his lifetime rival. Niji sighed. Well, you would find out eventually, I guess. The truth of the matter is that I'm no longer on Konoha's side. Hell, none from the Hyuga clan is anymore. Not that it matters. Niji wondered if any Hyuga, besides him of course, were still alive in the village. He doubted it, but you never know. Tenten pointed at him with an even more furious look. Just what are you dash? I've already answered you, interrupted Niji as he activated his Byakugan. I'm on Naruto's side now, which means I'm also your enemy. That's all that you need to know. Tenten took a step back in shock while Lee stepped forward. Niji, I don't dash. I've already said what I have to, interrupted Niji once again as he got into his taijutsu stance. Now, are you going to attack me or not? Hearing this, Lee also got into his taijutsu stance. I will stop you, Niji. Your youth can still be cleansed. Niji chuckled humorlessly. I guess that's what I'm going to miss the most from you, Lee. I guess it's just you and me then, Buns, said Fu as her green armor surrounded her. Tenten frowned before she readied herself. She knew Lee could handle things on his own. And she needed to do the same. On the rooftop of the Hokage building, Madara simply continued to watch. If only he had a refreshment right about now. Really, he needed to be more prepared for these kinds of things. Back on the underground base that used to belong to one snake pedophile in the past, the explosion from the combined attack from Naruto, Itachi, and Sasuke had died off to reveal a very injured Kabuto with his cloak having been completely destroyed. Naruto's face became disgusted once again as he saw the true body of Orochimaru coming out from Kabuto's navel snake. You really have an obsession with that guy, don't you? Kabuto scowled as he held his left shoulder in pain while standing right underneath the newly created hole that was in the middle of the ceiling, which let the sun rays from the afternoon sun hit the underground base. You of all people should understand why I have done everything that I have at this point, replied Kabuto in slight anger. Naruto chuckled humorlessly as he closed his eyes for a moment before opening them again and looking straight at Kabuto. I guess you're right about that, but I'm still going to kill you. Kabuto's lips transformed into a grin. And I'm still going to capture you along with Sasuke-kun over there, said Uchiha Himfed at hearing that. I really doubt that. For once, I agree with the theme, added Naruto. I'm also here, stated Itachi. And I'm not going to let that happen. Kabuto didn't respond. Instead, he disappeared from his spot only to reappear beside the still unconscious Anko. I still have this, he screamed as he tried to absorb the chakra from Anko's curse seal, his back turned to them. If he had been thinking clearly, he would have known that that was a stupid move to make. Seeing this, Naruto quickly sprung into action. Bansho Tenin. Kabuto grunted in pain as he felt himself be pulled backwards this time. The chakra that he had hoped and had started to absorb was left unattended because of this. Quickly seeing what Naruto intended to do, Kabuto made to shed his skin just like Orochimaru did, only for Naruto to grab and throw the Saikatsu Gakari straight at his back. Blood gushed out from Kabuto's mouth as the sword pierced him for a second time from his back, quickly absorbing what energy he had left from his corrupted soul. Kabuto felt the last of his strength leave him as he landed on the ground on his front side with a thud, the Saikatsu Gakari still sticking out from his back. No! Thought Kabuto in frustration as his vision began to blur. I cannot die like this. My dream, I was destined to discover every secret in this world. Just like the Rikudo Sennin. It was my destiny. Kabuto then closed his eyes as his body along with the Orochimaru snake clone were turned into ashes, leaving one single scroll in the pile of ashes that had once been his body. Naruto calmly walked up to where Kabuto had laid and died and picked up the Saikatsu Gakari, placing it on his back again as well as picking up the scroll and placing it in one of his own pockets for safekeeping. He would study it later. So that makes Kabuto, muttered Kurama. Only one more target left now. So that's it, said Itachi as he walked to stand beside Naruto. You said that dash. I know, interrupted Naruto as he looked at him. And I plan to keep it. Itachi, began Sasuke as he looked at his brother, why dash? I've already told you, little brother, interrupted Itachi as he looked at him in what was acceptance. This is all that I can do. I won't stop any of you, but I can't help you any further than what I have done either. Naruto sighed as he chuckled. You really are different from the rest of the Uchiha, aren't you, Itachi? Itachi also chuckled. Yes, I suppose that I am. Now dash. Itachi stopped as he suddenly felt an all too familiar chakra erupt into life from behind him, both Naruto and Sasuke sensing it as well. He. Son of a bitch, thought Naruto as he heard the laugh, Kurama sharing his thoughts. Things were not over yet, it seemed. In another part of the village, one random Konoha shinobi fell to the ground dead, having been stabbed from behind by none other than a grinning Suigetsu. Many other bodies of dead Konoha shinobi laid behind him having been the cause for their death. Oi, Suigetsu! Stop playing around, screamed Carrie with a hand on her glasses. We need to link up with Sasuke right now. Hearing this caused Suigetsu to snort as he placed the Kubikurabocho on his shoulder. He left us behind. I think that that's a pretty clear sign that he doesn't want us around right now, don't you? Karen scowled at that. It's only because you're too damn slow to follow him, that's why. Suigetsu raised an eyebrow in her direction as well as a smirk. Oh? So then what would you do if you're here as well? Karen merely grumbled under her breath as she turned away from the swordsman. Forget it, then. I'll just go on and find him on my own. Suigetsu merely shrugged as he too turned away from the redhead and began to walk away in the opposite direction. Do what you want. Before Karen could try finding Sasuke's chakra, she suddenly felt a hand on top of her head with an individual that she did not recognize appearing right in front of her in a flash. She could not see his eyes either because his jet black hair was currently shadowing them. Uzumaki Naruto, where is he? This guy's chakra is so dark, thought Karen as she began to sweat from sensing the individual's huge amount of chakra. I don't know. She answered meekly as well as being the last thing that she ever said in this lifetime. Then you are useless to me, stated the individual before he began to pull on something. And that something was Karen's soul. Karen's eyes rolled to the back of her head as the individual finished in completely ripping out her soul from her body falling to the ground face first as a result of this. She was dead even before she hit the ground. The individual then released the soul, not seeing any use of it any longer as it disappeared into nothingness. Hey, you! Suigetsu, who had been walking away and had missed what had happened to Karen, turned around to look at whoever it was that had addressed him. What? Uzumaki Naruto, where is he? Suigetsu snorted at the question. How the hell should I know that? I see, then you are of no use to me. Hearing this caused Suigetsu to smirk. What? You wanna fight or something? But it was then that he noticed the body of Karen on the ground, which made him stop for a moment. Just what had dash? The individual simply extended his right arm forward. Bansho Tenin. Suigetsu's eyes widened in complete surprise as he was pulled forward towards the individual. In response, Suigetsu brought the Kubikurabocho forward, intent on slicing whoever the person in front of him was. Seeing this, the individual simply brought his other arm forward. stopping the blade of the sword as well as placing his other hand on Suigetsu's head, much like he had done so with Karen once he was close enough. Suigetsu could not believe what he had seen. The person in front of him stopped Kubikuri Bocho with a single arm. He wasn't able to dwell on this any further, however, as the individual pulled out his soul much like he had done with Karen. Suigetsu's body fell to the ground on top of Karen's next to the individual who had not moved an inch the whole time. The individual then released the soul, not seeing any use in it either. Said soul simply disappeared into nothingness like Karen's had. The individual's hair then exposed his eyes, revealing them to be the ringed pattern that belonged to none other than the Rinnegan. The individual then looked out towards the Hokage mountain. Naruto, I will find you. And once I do, I will kill you. That's a promise. Shin had arrived in Konoha, ready to settle the score with Naruto once and for all. In life, everyone has different viewpoints in certain matters, okay, in every matter. It's both a rarity and a blessing when two parties can actually have the same opinion on a certain issue. But unfortunately, life is not that simple. That's the fact in life, period. It was the same with both Naruto and Sasuke. In most things, they disagreed, period. Sometimes for no real reason either. But that was just how it was. Idiotic? Perhaps. Childish? Maybe. Fun? Hell yes. Well, in their minds at least. But if there was one thing that both Uzumaki and Uchiha could agree on was the fact that they never, and they meant in the history of ever, did they ever want to hear the laugh that they were currently hearing at the moment. But as it were, it seemed that their prayers were not answered. Really, that just sucked. Plain and simple. One Uchiha Itachi could also agree with his foolish little brother and presumed rival on this matter. He himself had had more dealings with the owner of the laugh than that of which he was comfortable with. When he had heard of his death those weeks ago, or maybe months ago depending on how long he had been dead for. Well, he didn't feel much honestly. A little bit of joy perhaps. But that was it. And that same joy had just died the moment that he had heard the laugh. Naruto could only sigh as he turned around to look at Enko's still unconscious form as more purple chakra began to leak out from her curse seal as well as something else, or rather someone else. Well, this sucks. Kurama had just pretty much summed up the current situation that his host was currently in as well as what he thought of this latest twist. Naruto didn't offer a response to his bijou as the owner of the laugh was finally completely free from what had once been his safe haven. And said owner happened to be none other than Orochimaru. Orochimaru chuckled as he laid on the ground, his feet being in the form of that of a snake's body at the moment. He looked intently at the three individuals in front of him in what appeared to be in great amusement. And what exactly was that amusement? Who knew? Except maybe for Kabuto, but he was now dead, so that was a moot point at the moment. Orochimaru finally locked eyes with Naruto, Rinnegan eyes meeting his green-colored snake eyes. I never did expect for me to be revived in this situation. I must say, you have put on quite a show, Naruto-kun. Naruto didn't even acknowledge the kun placement after his name. As much as he didn't like it and was disgusted by it, it was not the time for something as childish as that. He still hadn't forgotten what Tsunade had told him about what was present in Sandame's journal. Mainly Orochimaru's involvement in what had happened for Yuzu to be left defenseless that night that the joint force from Kyumo, Iwa, and Kiri attacked. That was the main reason why he hadn't bothered to stop Orochimaru's escape from the curse seal, even if he didn't like said individual's laugh or well, the individual himself. Really, who did? Well, besides Kabuto. So you've been watching everything from the curse seal, have you? Commented Itachi with a neutral expression on his face. Orochimaru chuckled again as he finally got into a standing position, his feet turning to their normal human form. Yes, I have. Everything ever since Naruto-kun here asked for dear Anko to join him all those weeks ago. I was greatly surprised, but I think that I know as to why you're doing all of this. Naruto simply looked indifferent as he looked at Orochimaru. Is that so? And what might my reason be then? Orochimaru crossed his arms as he answered, you somehow found out about what happened with Yuzu. It would also explain why you ditched my old idiotic teammate 3 years ago. And that is where you are wrong, interrupted Naruto. I left Jiraiya for another reason which is unimportant right now. I only found out about Yuzu afterwards, which is where everything changed for me. But you should know that I also know of your involvement in this, Orochimaru. Both Itachi and Sasuke glanced at Naruto when they heard this. Orochimaru was also involved in all of this mess? Well, that was a bitch. Orochimaru merely smirked. I figured as much. I must ask, though, as to how you came to know of this information. The only ones that knew of this were Danzo and my old sensei. Orochimaru trailed off as his twisted mind began to race a mile a second. Naruto smirked. Exactly. I didn't get a chance to talk to Danzo seeing as circumstances made that almost impossible. But it doesn't matter in the end because of Dash. Sensei's journal, interrupted Orochimaru as he closed his eyes momentarily. Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise. You know of it? Orochimaru snorted at that. Of course I know of it. I was Sensei's favorite pupil, after all. I saw him write things in it in the past, but I never imagined that he would also write about that incident there as well. Orochimaru shook his head. Age must have gotten to him. Naruto shrugged. It was a good thing that he did. Well, for me at least. I don't know how you feel about it though. Orochimaru waved his hand in dismissal. I don't care in the slightest. Just like I don't care about this so-called war that's currently taking place at the moment. Naruto crossed his arms in front of him as he looked at Orochimaru with a questioning look. What do you care about then? Orochimaru smirked as he turned his gaze towards Sasuke. Why, Sasuke-kun's eyes of course. Sasuke didn't have an outward expression of what he thought when he heard this. Itachi for his part took a step forward as he looked at Orochimaru in hostility, his Mangekyo spinning wildly. That's the last thing that you will do. If he felt fear, Orochimaru did a good job at hiding it as he locked eyes with Itachi. Don't take me for a fool, Itachi. Do you really think that I would try anything right now? The reason that I've lived so long is that I know when I'm clearly outmatched and to not try anything when that happens. Itachi didn't respond, but he still kept his Mangekyo-activated eyes on Orochimaru. I still have something that I want to know, stated Naruto, making Orochimaru turn his eyes towards him in order to look at him directly, and only you have the answer to that. Orochimaru smirked slightly upon hearing that. Let me guess, you want to know as to just how exactly I managed to disable the defensive barriers around Yuzu that night. Naruto didn't give the Snake Sannin a response, but the said Sannin already knew that he had hit right in the mark. Orochimaru then shrugged slightly. It wasn't too hard really. The Uzumaki clan were too trustful. That was their greatest weakness in a sense. They didn't suspect me in the slightest when I arrived. But that didn't mean that I was any less careful. They didn't suspect me, that much was true. But that didn't mean that they couldn't if I gave them a reason to. Even I wasn't arrogant enough to think that I would have gotten out of their life if that happened. Hell, I'm still not. Get to the point already, interrupted Naruto. Orochimaru sighed slightly before continuing, long story short, brainwashed, one of the only few people in the Uzumaki clan that knew how to exactly disable the barrier. Now that brought a new set of questions, well, mainly two. And one of those was Dash. What do you mean by brainwashed? Asked Sasuke with a raised eyebrow. Orochimaru chuckled as he closed his eyes, remembering the good old days. It was one of my earlier experiments. It was a type of virus, I guess you could say, although that was unintentional as it proved to be a failure given that it had too many flaws. Itachi shook his head at that. And yet, you still used it for something as important as that. Orochimaru simply shrugged. At that time, it was the only possible way that I could have done it. I still didn't have the curse mark at my disposal. Enough, interrupted Naruto. Go on. Seeing the impatience of the silver-haired Jinchuriki's tone, Orochimaru decided to do just that. Like I have already said, the Uzumaki clan didn't mistrust me in the slightest. They even invited me to a dinner party that was hosted by the clan head himself. Normally they wouldn't have done so much for a regular Konoha shinobi, but I was one of the Sandame's pupils, so that made me different, I suppose. Orochimaru chuckled slightly at that before continuing. For whatever reason, they invited me, which gave me the perfect opportunity that I needed. Like I've said, there were only a handful of people that I knew how to disable the barrier. One of them was the clan head, but he was out of the question for obvious reasons. The next choice, and the one that I went with, was the clan head's second in command and closest friend, a man named Uzumaki Kenji. Naruto was simply listening to all of this with rapt attention. At last, the last piece of the puzzle. Orochimaru then shrugged again as he continued. It wasn't hard, really. During the party that night, I simply slipped the virus in the form of a pill that I had prepared earlier into his drink. There was only one problem though, and that was the Uzumaki's strong immune system. Not willing to take any chances, I decided to make it even more potent than a regular one, almost 10 times stronger in fact. Orochimaru stopped as he chuckled. Remember how I said that the virus was a failure because of its drawbacks? Well, one of them was the ultimate death of the person whose body the virus entered. The virus basically destroys the body from the inside. So I didn't have much time. But the strong resilience of the Uzumaki clan worked in my favor here, but once again, I didn't want to take any chances. The joint force from Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri was to begin the attack once I gave Danzo the okay. I didn't wait too long. The next night was when I ordered for Kenji to deactivate both the barrier and the whirlpools. And the rest, well, history speaks for itself, finished Orochimaru with one final shrug. You still haven't explained how that virus actually works, commented Itachi. I expected no less from him, thought Orochimaru with an internal smirk. The virus consists of the most basic thing, which is cells. Then it's not really a virus, interrupted Sasuke. A virus is not a cell, nor does it contain any cells. Orochimaru nodded his head at that. Yes, but that's just a term for it that I have given it. Nothing else. Call it what you want, it really doesn't change what it does. Orochimaru then paused before continuing. The cells were programmed to move throughout the whole body, duplicating and replacing the original cells from the host's body. And that's where the problem lies. The body itself starts to eventually reject them, guessed Itachi. Orochimaru clapped. Bravo, yes. That's exactly the case. In the beginning, I had thought that this wouldn't happen, but my calculations proved to be wrong in the end. But the most important part was the duplication of the cells present in the brain. Once you control that, you have everything else under control. But like with the rest, they too start to be rejected by the body itself. During the time that they're not, though, I have complete control of the person's body. Which is what you did with Kenji, finished Naruto as he looked at Orochimaru straight in the eyes. You also made him tell you just how to deactivate the seals that create the whirlpool surrounding Yuzu by yourself, which you later gave to Danzo as well. Orochimaru was silent for a few moments before he grinned. You are exactly correct. I really didn't have any interest in Yuzu in the slightest at that time. I still don't really. But Danzo did for some reason. The scroll that the clan head hid, thought Naruto. Well, the clan head was technically his grandfather, but since he never knew him, it just felt weird calling him that. Now we know as to how Danzo's little Umbu group managed to get into Yuzu when Kabuto stole the Fuinjutsu that day, added Kurama. Indeed. Everything was coming together now. Itachi glanced at Naruto, trying to decipher as to what the young Uzumaki was planning on doing now. Mainly, would he now kill Orochimaru, or? He didn't want to finish that thought. So all this time you knew? Muttered Sasuke, catching Orochimaru's attention. Said Snake Sennin chuckled. I did. As well as many other things. But so what? Every shinobi has his or her secrets. Besides, it wasn't as if it concerned you in the slightest, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke looked at Orochimaru with narrowed eyes. And what of the Uchiha massacre? Did you know as to why Itachi did it? Itachi sighed silently as he closed his eyes. Orochimaru glanced at Itachi momentarily before looking back at Sasuke. Yes, I did. But if I would have told you that, then you would have never had come to me seeking to get stronger in order to kill Itachi. And I couldn't let that happen. Naruto for his part looked at Sasuke, who was scowling at Orochimaru with an unreadable look on his face. You're in the same boat as me, Sasuke. We've both been lied to and have been used for the ends of other people. But that's no longer the case. Hearing this, Sasuke sighed as he turned away from Orochimaru. You're right. We were kids and were simply led by the hand by other people in going down the path that they wanted for us to follow. But not anymore. Now, we have power. And that's the only way that we can break through all of that and forge our own path, doing whatever it is that we want to do. Naruto nodded. I couldn't have said it better than that. He then turned his attention to Orochimaru, who was watching all of this intently. What will you do now, Orochimaru? Orochimaru chuckled as his tongue slithered out for a moment. I'm not against you, if that's what you're asking. I care for this village any less than you do. I highly doubt that, interrupted Naruto with narrowed eyes. Itachi opened his eyes to look at Naruto. You're not planning on dash. Yes, I am, interrupted Naruto. Itachi's eyes widened at this. But he was in part at fault for what he did to Yuzu. If you're going to forgive him, then why aren't you dash? I've never said that I've forgiven him, interrupted Naruto again as he stared at Orochimaru, who looked right back at him. I'm simply going to use him. Orochimaru chuckled at that. Oh. But you saying that out loud kind of ruins the whole thing, doesn't it? Naruto shook his head. Not at all. After all, I can kill you anytime that I want. I don't know how much you've seen of what I can do through Anko, but you should already know that I'm not the same little kid that you knew of as of 3 years ago. But this way, you can live longer and see the village that you hate so much be burned to the ground. I'm sure that you can't pass that up. The temptation is just too great, isn't it? Orochimaru couldn't help but to laugh as he looked at Naruto. You know me too well, Uzumaki Naruto. Itachi glanced at Orochimaru. Why is he agreeing to this? Even he must know that his ultimate fate is death. So why? Naruto then turned towards the hole in the ceiling that had been created in the fight with Kabuto. We need to move. It's time to wrap things up once and for all. Orochimaru looked at Naruto with curiosity. And what makes you think that the end will happen with the destruction of this village? Naruto's face turned into a small grin. Call it a hunch. But Itachi, you. Naruto turned his attention towards Itachi, who merely sighed. Sasuke for his part still had his back facing the group. He already knew what was going to happen, what Itachi would choose, and he'd rather not see it. Itachi calmly walked until he was right in front of Naruto, looking him straight in the eyes. My decision still hasn't changed. If it doesn't happen this way, I will have no choice but to fight you, even if I don't want to. I also don't want to see the village again. I've already seen it once, and I'd rather not do it again. Besides, there really isn't anything else for me to add to this little tale. The part that I was meant to play has been met. And now, it's time for you to continue yours. Naruto simply took hold of Itachi's shoulder, their eyes meeting one final time before Naruto took hold of his soul thanks to the power granted to him by the Rinnegan. Itachi's body fell into the ground, revealing it to have been an Iwa shinobi. Naruto then released the soul, which caused it to disappear in a matter of seconds. Farewell, Uchiha Itachi. Let's go. Naruto turned to look at Sasuke, who was standing right underneath the hole before he jumped upwards, heading right through it and back to the surface. Naruto turned towards Orochimaru one final time. Try anything, and you die. It's that simple. Orochimaru simply nodded before he turned towards the unconscious Anko. And what of her? Seeing as to whom Orochimaru was referring to, Naruto walked up towards Anko before picking up her bridal style. He didn't even turn towards Orochimaru as he disappeared in a dark flash, taking Anko with him. Orochimaru merely chuckled as his snake tongue slithered fully out from his mouth, turning to follow Sasuke. I guess that following Sasuke-kun is the best way right now. With that, he jumped upward and through the hole, just like Sasuke had done. The intent was similar in all. To finally finish what had begun in Konoha just hours earlier. And that was its destruction. Konoha Senpu. Hakusho Kaiten. Lee grunted in pain as his left foot managed to get caught in the counterattack by Neji, his once-lifetime rival. Currently, the two shinobi had taken their fight away from the rooftop that they had originally been and down towards the deserted street below. Neji sighed as he looked at the kneeling Lee a few feet away in front of him. Give up, Lee. Your taijutsu is ineffective against my Byakugan. Lee could only frown as he heard this. That was true. Well, for his regular taijutsu at least. And that had been what he had been using up to this point. Hell, it was what he had been using ever since they became a team, period. But realization began to hit the miniature version of Guy, and that was that in order to beat the person in front of him, he couldn't hold back. If he did, he wouldn't be able to win. His only chance was to use taijutsu that was just simply too fast for even Neji's Byakugan to use. And that meant unleashing the 8 gates of his chakra system. I'm sorry, Guy-sensei, thought Lee as he stood up, looking intently at Neji while he began to open the first gate. But I can't afford to lose here. Neji narrowed his Byakugan-activated eyes as he noticed Lee's chakra began to grow bigger and bigger. His eyes then widened when he realized what Lee was up to. The gates, I didn't think that he would go this far. Shomon, Kai. Seeing Lee's skin beginning to turn red, Neji gritted his teeth in anger before he focused all of his chakra into every one of his chakra points. The winner here would be decided on who had both the bigger stamina and pain resilient. Tomon, Kai. Seeing Lee preparing to attack, Neji released all of the chakra that he had accumulated into his chakra points and held the continuous flow as well, coating him in an invisible thin chakra shield that only those with the Byakugan or Sharingan would be able to see. Lee was in front of Neji before said Hyuga had the chance to see him move. Lee then proceeded to kick Neji straight in the gut, sending said Hyuga flying high up into the air. Neji's mouth soon began to leak out blood as Lee appeared above him in the air, wrapping some of his bandages that he wore around his hands around Neji's body. He's Yura Renge. On the rooftop of the Hokage building, Madara watched the battle between Neji and Lee with a careful eye in his sitting position. He even raised an eyebrow in surprise as he saw the last attack. That's a very powerful form of taijutsu, all right. Even he had to admit to that. When he saw something actually worth praising, he would admit it. It was that simple. And he had to give props to the taijutsu that he just saw. Still, who would win here today? The genius or the so-called loser? Lee panted heavily as he landed on the ground, a few feet away from the makeshift crater that he had just created a couple of moments ago. A cloud of dust was currently surrounding the area, but it didn't matter much at the moment. This was the taijutsu that Lee had trained hard for in order to beat Neji. Did it work? The taijutsu specialist was pretty sure that it had. And boy, was in a surprise then as Niji was in front of him the next moment, heavily injured but still movable. What? Niji merely narrowed his eyes as he attacked. Hak Hyaku Niju Hachi Shop. Lee could only scream in pain as Niji carried out with his palm strikes at each of Lee's chakra points as the speed doubled from that of the last palm strike that he performed. Lee was then flown backwards once Niji had performed the last palm strike on him right on the left upper section of his chest with him landing on the ground on his back. Blood began to ooze out from his mouth much like how it had happened with Niji. Just how dash. I was prepared for it, interrupted Niji as he fell to his knees. We were once teammates, Lee. I already knew how fast you could get once you activated your gates. Even with my Byakugan, I wouldn't be able to dodge. So I took it head-on by covering my body with a chakra shield by releasing through every one of my chakra points. Niji then smirked slightly. I managed to repel much of the damage, but not all of it seems. Cute, and cute. What a lovely reunion. Niji's eyes widened as he heard the voice. It sounded just like Naruto. Except that there was something different about it. Right in between Niji and Lee appeared a third individual, his Rinnegan eyes boring straight into Niji's soul, his back turned on Lee for the moment. Not that it mattered. Lee couldn't do anything well right now. Niji frowned as he took in the newcomer's appearance. He resembled Naruto, having the 6 birthmarks on his cheeks as well as the voice and the Rinnegan. But still. You put up quite a fight, Niji. Niji's frown was still present on his face. Who are you? Shin smirked. Call me Shin. Shin, repeated Niji in his mind. He didn't know of any Shin. Shin then turned to look at the down Lee with a bored look on his face. You have outstayed your welcome, Konoha shinobi. Lee could only scream in pain once more as Shin appeared in front of him, placing his foot on top of Lee's stomach where he began to stomp on it. Niji scowled as he tried to get up but found that he couldn't. Lee had inflicted more damage on him than he had thought. Leave him out of this. Shin snorted as he stopped his actions before looking back at Niji. And here I thought that you wanted your revenge on Konoha for your father. Am I wrong? Niji didn't respond but kept his eyes locked straight at Shin. Shin smirked as he saw this. What? Do you actually care for this one? That would just make you a hypocrite, wouldn't it? And not to mention the fact that you two were just fighting each other a minute ago, you know. Call it what you want, interrupted Niji. But it has nothing to do with you. Shin shrugged. You're right. It doesn't. But that doesn't mean that I can't just do this. With that, Shin turned to look down at Lee and picked him up by the neck, ripping out his soul much like how he had done with both Suigetsu and Karen before. After this, Shin simply dropped Lee's body to the ground as well as releasing the soul in his hand, making it disappear into nothingness. Niji could only look in shock at what had just happened. Shin shook his head as he walked up towards Niji who was still on his knees. I was planning on asking you to join me, but you disappoint me, Niji. I don't even know why Naruto even bothered to include you at all anymore. Niji simply lowered his head to the ground, knowing full well that he was currently defenseless against the person in front of him. Shin was about to proceed on doing what he had done with the rest until Madara appeared behind him, gun by in hand and ready to use it to bring down the target in front of him. Sensing this, Shin disappeared in a dark flash only for him to reappear behind Madara who was already prepared for this. Shinra Tensei. Shin scowled as he felt himself be pushed back until he disappeared in another dark flash. Niji could only look up at Madara in surprise. What are you dash? Don't misunderstand me, interrupted Madara with a small shake of his head. I'm not doing this for you. I'm just simply making some entertainment before I retire from all of this. That is all. Then look no further, Madara. Madara looked directly in front of him as Shin reappeared again, a smirk on his face as their Rinnegan-activated eyes met. This is what I've been waiting for, thought Madara. Shin's thoughts were similar at the moment. Although there was one other thing that he wanted more than this. But this would do for now. In the forest surrounding the village of Konoha, one very small man was having troubles at the moment. And that trouble came in the form of 4 kunoichi and a bijou. Well, that didn't sound too bad, well sort of. Fire style, Gokaku. Wind style, Detappa. Anoki gritted his teeth in anger as the empowered fireball made its way towards him. In response, he quickly flew towards the side in order to dodge the attack. Seeing this, the Gobi was quick to ram his head towards that direction, impacting straight with Anoki, who brought his arms in front of him again in order to try to halt the Gobi. Using this to her advantage, Mikoto quickly jumped off the Gobi's head and down towards Anoki with her sword in hand. She was pleasantly surprised, however, as she saw Kushina right behind her. Anoki looked up above in order to see the incoming kunoichi with both of them armed with their swords. Anoki scowled as he flew backwards in order to dodge the swipe from Mikoto's sword. Seeing this, Kushina used the Gobi's body as a propeller as she pushed Chakra to her feet, the act making her fly towards the floating Anoki, who immediately spotted her. Earth style, Kengan. Kushina frowned as she saw Anoki fly towards her with his right fist covered in hardened rock. She immediately brought her sword forward, which was quickly coated in wind thanks to her chakra. Anoki, thinking that he would win easily, sent his rock-enclosed fist towards Kushina, which was met by her sword. Anoki screamed in pain as he felt extreme pain in his upper arm, which lasted only a moment. After that, he didn't feel anything at all in his right arm. Maybe it had to do with the fact that his right arm had been cut off from the rest of his body. Realizing this and holding his right shoulder in pain, Anoki could look at the descending Kushina with pure hatred in his eyes before he was suddenly hit from behind by the Gobi's head, which sent him flying down towards the forest below. Having seen all of this, Mito was clearly surprised. I didn't think that Kushina would have actually aimed for Anoki's arm instead of his fist. Fuka looked at her. And why is that? Mito chuckled slightly. Well, she's not really one for thinking up a strategy and using it in battle. Rather, she just goes in headstrong, nothing else. Things change. Mito didn't even have to look behind her to know that it had been Mikoto who had said that, as said Uchiha appeared on top of the Gobi's head again. Mito sighed. I suppose so. But now with the old fart out of the way, we can finally advance toward Konoha. Hearing this, the Gobi was immediately on the move towards Konoha, shaking the ground as well as destroying many trees in the process as he made his way towards the village. The others could handle everything here. Kushina landed gracefully on one of the many tree branches from one of the many trees present in the forest where the fight between the shinobi and the samurai was currently taking place. Looking around her, Kushina saw many dead bodies from Kyumo, Iwa, Aim and Kiri alike, as well as those from the samurai. But it seemed that the fight had gone towards where the Yonbi and Rokubi were currently at, which was a good distance behind her. Not that Kushina had a problem with that. It was actually a good thing for the redhead. And why was that? The answer became apparent as Anoki came limping from further down the forest, his right arm missing. He had lost quite a bit of blood as a result. It was a miracle that he was still alive and still being able to move as well. Anoki could sigh as he noticed Kushina appearing in front of him. Come here to finish the job, did you? That's right. Anoki merely sighed again as he looked at Kushina, his vision becoming quite blurry, which didn't surprise him in the slightest. I never expected to be killed by the wife of the man that I hated the most in this world. Kushina simply chuckled as she stopped in front of him. Ironic how things turn out sometimes, isn't it? Anoki brought his only present arm back to his side, releasing his shoulder despite the pain he felt. That goes the same for you, Uzumaki Kushina. Just how long do you think that you'll be able to live in this life that you seem to be so fond of? Kushina's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Anoki chuckled as he closed his eyes, not that it mattered. He couldn't use any more jutsu. And even if he did try to fly away, he wouldn't make it very far. He had already lost too much blood. He could feel the control over his chakra beginning to waver as well due to this. I'm talking about your life with your son. Do you really believe that you two will be together forever? Because that would be a foolish thought. Everything comes to an end at some point. Just like your husband, just like me, and just like Konoha. Kushina raised her sword as she looked at the now content-looking Inoki. It was like he didn't care that he was going to die right now. Yes, I do believe that. No matter what, nothing will come in between us. Inoki simply snorted, his eyes still closed as he lowered his head. You're going to suffer a lot if you still keep believing that. That was the last thing that Inoki ever said in this world as Kushina cut his head from his body, the small body falling to the ground as a result and just simply lying there motionlessly. Kushina placed her sword at her side as she made to walk towards Konoha to link up with the rest. Mei and the others could finish the battle here. Not to mention the extra reserve from Kiri that was under the command of Yagura. They should be arriving soon at any rate. But what Inoki had told her lingered with her, however. Was he right? Everything did end at some point, she had to admit to that. So did that mean that the same was going to happen between her and Naruto? Kushina shook her head to clear her mind from those thoughts. She shouldn't be thinking like that. Especially at this time. There were things that still needed to be done. With that, she took off towards the trees, destination being Konoha. Naruto appeared in another dark flash in the middle of a war zone. Literally. In front of him stood the massive forms of both Matatabi and Gyuki, rampaging the combined forces of Konoha and Suna. Well, whoever remained that is and was still willing to fight at this point with no present leader. It's 9, yo. Hearing this caused Matatabi to look down to see Naruto just standing there in the middle of the street. What the hell is he doing, wondered Yujito as she saw this through her bijou. Naruto jumped in the air in order to land on top of Gyuki's head, looking at both bijou. Yujito, B. It's time to get a move on already. We've played around too much. Matatabi smirked, looking back down towards the angry-looking Konoha shinobi as they saw Naruto. Let's do this, then. Gyuki didn't respond. Instead, blue and red chakra began to gather around his mouth as well as Matatabi, while Kurama's chakra began to filter through Naruto. This chakra. Naruto turned to look towards the direction of the Hokage mountain, immediately sensing an all too familiar chakra coming from that direction. Kurama grinned. So he's here, is he? Naruto turned his back on the Hokage mountain. He would worry about that after this. His eyes turned into that of Kurama's in an orange tinge as his whole body was surrounded in Kurama's chakra cloak. Running forward, Naruto was centered right in the middle between Matatabi and Gyuki as they combined their tailed beast ball for the second time, except with Naruto pushing Kurama's chakra into it as well, which made it grow even bigger than before. By Jadama. All the shinobi caught in the blast were obliterated in a matter of seconds as well as the earth itself. Looking down at his handiwork as he landed on top of Gyuki's head again, Naruto could see no survivors. Not only that, but there now was scorched land all around them thanks to the intensity of the attack. No buildings and life besides themselves now stood. Well, at least that was the case until one Senju Tsunade appeared in front of them, an enraged look on her face as the diamond on her forehead was activated again. Naruto had to admit that he was surprised. Finally recovered, did you? But you're too late. I wonder if there is any other Konoha shinobi left in this village that is still alive. Now the only ones left are the civilians. Tsunade gritted her teeth in anger. You'll not get away with this. Naruto shook his head in amusement. I already have. Your so-called allies of Suna are now gone as well. And as for the Tsuchikage dash, he's dead. Tsunade's eyes widened as she felt 4 more individuals appear behind her. And the one that had spoken had been none other than her grandmother, Mito. Kushina has already killed him, continued Mito as she looked at her granddaughter. You're all alone, my granddaughter. There is nothing left for you to do but to surrender. Tsunade calmed herself as she turned around to face her grandmother. She knew for a fact that Naruto wouldn't bother to attack her. He already had the chance of killing her before and hadn't taken it. As she faced her grandmother, Tsunade saw another redhead standing next to her as well as another woman who Tsunade immediately recognized as Uchiha Mikoto. And finally the Jinchuriki from IWA. Tsunade narrowed eyes as she looked at Mikoto for the moment. You. Mikoto smirked. Good to see you again, Tsunade. I must say that you haven't aged a day since the last time that I saw you all those years ago. So she was also in this, was she? Thought Tsunade in anger as she looked at Mikoto. Just how is she even alive? Naruto simply sighed as he turned away from the sight. This had nothing to do with him. Not that he wanted any part of this at any rate. No, he had something more important to do at the moment. Without a word, Naruto disappeared in a dark flash. Mikoto, having seen this, frowned. There was something else going on here, it would seem. And she had every intention of knowing what that was. Mito simply looked at Tsunade with an emotionless look. Let's finish this, my granddaughter. Turning to look at Fuka and Han, she said, don't interfere. I don't care what you do, but this is between me and her. Is that clear? Both Fuka and Han simply nodded. Noticing that Mikoto wasn't here anymore but not really dwelling on it, Mito turned her attention back to Tsunade. She had won their 2 previous confrontations. But it seemed that her granddaughter was not planning on holding back here. The diamond on her own forehead began to glow as she prepared herself. If that was the case, she wouldn't hold back either. It was time to settle this bitter inter-family relationship. Both Yujito and B, having turned back into their human form, were running towards the direction of the Hokage mountain under the direction of both Gyuki and Matatabi. Both Bijou could sense Kurama's chakra, so they knew that Naruto had left towards that direction. It wasn't long, however, for Han to appear behind them, running as well as he began to follow them. But they didn't comment a single thing about this, however. They sensed that they needed to be there together. All of the Jinchuriki united once more just like it had happened in AIM. Why? They really didn't know. But Gyuki, Matatabi, and Kokuo knew why. With that knowledge in mind, they began to message the remainder of the Bijou fighting outside of Konoha to head to Naruto's location as soon as possible as well. Up in the sky, the sun was beginning to descend. Niji shielded his eyes from the incoming debris as Madara was sent flying into one of the nearby buildings in the area by none other than Shin. And this was a sight that he could not believe. Uchiha Madara was losing? Just who is this Shin? That was the only thing that he could ask as he saw the battle rage on. Shin for his part walked forward towards the building where he had sent Madara flying into, black markings covering his face as well as the rest of his body but were not visible due to the outfit that he was currently wearing, which was the same as the one that he had worn in Naruto's mind. The said markings were from the curse mark that he now possessed thanks to Kabuto. He still didn't know fully what he could do with it, and Madara was the best training dummy in his mind in order to war him up against his real target. Despite the heavy pain and blood present on his body, Madara currently had a smirk on his face as he appeared from the hole in the building that he had created against his will mere moments ago. Seeing this caused Shin to frown. What the hell are you so cocky about? But Madara didn't respond. Instead he brought his gunbai forward, intent on continuing on fighting. Or that's what he appeared to be doing at least. Shin narrowed his eyes as he looked at Madara, all the fun that he had felt up to this point now gone. He disappeared in a dark flash in an instant, reappearing right in front of Madara less than a second after. But Madara had already been prepared for this as shown by his act of placing his gunbai in between him and Shin. But this act proved to be fruitless, however, as Shin broke straight through Madara's favorite weapon, breaking it in half with his fist that was surrounded by pure black energy. Madara was sent flying back once again as Shin continued on with his attack, now having even more of a reason to destroy Madara. And that was to remove the smirk that was still plastered on his face despite the fact that he was sent flying back into the same building for a second time. Shin could only growl at this. Just what was the damn Uchiha smirking for? It was completely idiotic. Finally coming to realize why Madara was doing this, Neji simply let out a grin appear on his face as well as a laugh which immediately caught Shin's attention. Shin scowled at the still kneeling Hyuga in front of him. Just why the hell are you laughing now? Neji stopped laughing as he looked straight at Shin, no fear present as he let out a dark smirk appear on his face. You still don't get it, do you? It looks like you aren't as clever as you thought you were. Shin growled at this. Do you even know who I am? Neji shrugged if barely. No, I don't. And I really don't care either way. Not at this point at least. Having heard enough and having reached his limit as well, Shin growled again as he appeared in front of the defenseless Hyuga in a dark flash, his right hand turned fist surrounded in a dark energy as he sent his fist straight through Neji's heart, piercing it as well as destroying it in less than a second. Despite this, however, Neji's face remained in the dark smirk. He had seen what Naruto had promised him as well as learned the true nature of the village of Konoha and the shinobi world as a whole. And he was sure that Naruto would carry out his other promise. Everything that Naruto had promised him the now silver-haired Jinchuriki had done. And Neji was content with that. He had followed through with what he believed in. Was it wrong? He didn't really care, even if he was called a bastard or a traitor for what he had done. He had finally felt free for the first time in his life. To follow through in something that he truly believed in, that was enough for Neji. His Konoha headband fell to the ground next to him as Shin retracted his fist, Neji's now lifeless body falling to the ground on its back. The cursed seal on his forehead was visible for a few moments before it disappeared, never to appear on his forehead ever again. This was the site that Fu arrived at after having fought and defeated Tenten before heading over here to see what was happening due to the fact that she had felt an extremely dark chakra present in the atmosphere. She could only watch with wide eyes as she gazed at Neji's lifeless body on the ground as she landed on the now extremely and almost destroyed street. Neji, it can't be. Chomei couldn't only sigh as he saw this through Fu. Shin turned his attention to Fu as he shook his hand that he had used to destroy Neji's heart. So you've finally arrived, have you, Fu? Perfect. Fu narrowed her eyes at the person in front of her, Komiai's chakra beginning to surround her whole body as she shook in barely restrained anger. You. Don't worry about anything, Nanabai Jinchuriki. Both Fu and Shin looked at the down Madara that was still in the building, his smirk still present on his face as parts of his chest were in the process of regenerating. The Hyuga died in peace. Shin frowned as he heard this. It looks like you're also delusional, Madara. You dash. You'll be dead soon enough, interrupted Madara as he closed his eyes. I've already seen what I have to do. Nothing more is needed. My role is at an end. Shin was about to retort before he suddenly jumped high into the air in order to dodge the incoming blade that would have sure enough taken his head off if he hadn't done so. Seeing this, Madara smirked one final time before his soul started to leave from the body that he currently inhabited. He had already gotten what he wanted. He had accomplished what he wanted. He had seen what he wanted. At last, just like Neji, he was at peace as well. With that, he finally left the land of the living, exposing the real individual who had been used as the sacrifice. Shin grinned as he landed on the rooftop of the building that he had sent Madara flying into, gazing at the individual that he had been waiting for. So you're finally here, Naruto. Fu for her part turned her eyes to Naruto's back as he faced Shin, the Saikatsu Gakari currently on his shoulders. Naruto. So it's finally going to happen, thought Chomei as he watched everything intently. Naruto looked at Niji's body for a moment before turning his full attention back to Shin, having already seen Niji's smirk on his face despite the fact that he was already dead. "Niji, you were of great help." Kurama merely stayed silent. Both Naruto and Shin locked eyes. It was time to finish this. To bring things into their conclusion. Both Naruto and Shin could agree to that at least. Mikoto had a twinkle of playfulness present in her dark black eyes as she ran through the deserted streets of the once proud village of Konoha, many buildings burning around her with some already having been burned to the ground. And why should this sight bring playfulness to her eyes? Well, that was a stupid question. Everyone knew the answer to that at this point. At last, the sight that I have waited years in order to see, is finally here. Really, how much sweeter did something that you extremely wanted feel after you have waited and prepared for it for many, many years? A lot sweeter than normal, all right. Mikoto could attest to that herself. But she would enjoy the sight even more later after everything had been said and done. Mainly, when everyone in Konoha was truly dead and gone forever. Most, if not all, of the shinobi had been taken care of. That only left the civilians, and Mikoto already knew where they would be. Mainly, in the evacuation tunnels that ran through the underground of Konoha and into the caves within the Hokage mountain. She would worry about that later, though. First, she needed to find Naruto. Whatever was happening right now, it was centered around him. She knew that much at least. But where would he be right now? Mikoto sighed. If only Zetsu were here, I could dash. Yo. Speak of the devil. Mikoto grinned slightly as white Zetsu appeared beside her, running alongside her. Luck was on her side, right, it would seem. Mikoto glanced at the grinning white Zetsu. Well, it's good that you're here, even if you're not the original. I need for you to tell me where Naruto is right now. The white Zetsu clone was silent for a few moments, his grin disappearing before he responded. Before that, there's something that you need to know. Hearing this, Mikoto stopped her running, which also caused for white Zetsu to halt. Turning to face him, she crossed her arms under her bust. What is it? And make it quick. We don't have too much time to dash. Obito is dead. Mikoto's eyes were suddenly shadowed by her hair when those words hit her ears. What? Now white Zetsu might not be the sharpest kunai around. Let's not even say where that would leave his clones. But even he knew that the current tone in the female Uchiha's voice when she said that single word was not a good thing for his health, or well, his life, period. Damn. Why the hell did he have to get chosen to tell Mikoto this? It just wasn't fair. He had feelings too. Hearing no answer from the clone in front of her, Mikoto took a single step forward, her eyes becoming visible and showing her Sharingan, which was currently spinning wildly in what appeared to be anger. Answer me. White Zetsu felt a lump on his throat which he could not swallow, taking a step back. Oh, Obito is dead, he repeated for a second time. A second step forward. How? A second step back. We don't know. The last thing we saw was him and Toby going off to fight somewhere else. Another step forward. Then how do you know he's dead? Another step back. The cells that Madara implanted in him, they're no longer alive, which can only mean that dash. Whatever else the clone was going to say was brought to an abrupt halt as he was sliced in half as well as burned by Mikoto, who had appeared in front of him and had brought out her sword, an emotionless look currently present on her face. Gripping the sword that she currently held in her hand more tightly, Mikoto closed her eyes tightly as she fought back the tears that were threatening to come out. Obito, you idiot. Just what were you thinking? After a few moments of trying to take back control of her emotions, Mikoto finally realized that she had just taken out the one person, or rather being, that could tell her what she wanted to know. Well, nothing she could do about it now. Looking around one more time, Mikoto took off running again, intent on looking for Naruto the old-fashioned way. But what the clone had told her before she had killed him still remained with Mikoto as she continued to run through the deserted streets. Never would she have guessed that Obito would have died. Not only that, but to have been taken out by Toby of all people, that struck Mikoto hard. She could already guess as to how Toby was here in the first place after she herself had killed him in aim. And that, how, couldn't be none other than Kabuto. And well, the Edo Tensei as well. You better pray that you're not still in the land of the living, Toby, or I'll make you wish that you weren't. And that rang double for Kabuto. The whole reason Toby was even here again was because of him. From that thought alone, anyone could tell that the last remaining female Uchiha was not in a good mood right now. She had always believed that Obito was the person that she could always rely on, despite their rather odd relationship. But that came as no surprise. They had known each other for years and had become accustomed to each other's company as well as the quirks that came along with that company. Thinking of all of this, Mikoto couldn't help but remember the day when she had finally met Obito for the first time after she had thought that he had died. Flashback, start. A rather nervous-looking Mikoto could be seen slowly walking through a dark corridor of one of the many hidden Uchiha hideouts in the Land of Fire. Said Uchiha was wearing her simple, housewife attire that her husband, Fugaku, seemed to have been rather fond of. Of course, the now-dead clan head had always preferred for her to have just simply acted like the housewife that she had become after she had gotten married to him. No more could she be Uchiha Mikoto, the proud jonin that she had always been before her marriage. Her best friend Kushina had always complained about that to her every time that they had gotten together to catch up. Thinking of the redhead brought a sad smile on the woman. For her to have died at such a young age. And not to mention the fact that she had left her newborn son all alone in the harsh world of the shinobi. It was just too sad. Of course she had tried to provide the now 8-year-old boy with as much as possible that she could without Fugaku finding out about it, but in all reality it wasn't much. She could have done better. If only she hadn't let her husband dictate her life. Just like Kushina had always told her. If only. But I can't change the past, thought Mikoto in regret before she started to become determined. I can still change the future, however. I promise you this, Kushina, I will get your son out of that hellhole someday. One way or another. Someday. For now, though, she needed to focus on other things. Like what was currently happening. Mikoto stopped in front of a doorway, reading herself for whomever was waiting for her on the other side. Black Zetsu hadn't really been specific on that matter. All he had told her was to come to this location after she had gotten out of Konoha. Hesitating for just a moment longer, Mikoto finally placed her hand on the doorknob before she turned it, opening the door and walking into the room and closing the door behind her. Looking around, Mikoto found herself in what appeared to be more like an underground cave, not really a room which she had been expecting. The cave-looking room was medium-sized, with the only source of light being torches that were hanging off the walls all around the cave. After a couple of minutes of just standing there and waiting for something to happen, Mikoto finally walked forward and further into the cave, stopping until she was standing right in the middle of the cave. Looking around again, Mikoto tried to see if anyone else was present. But she couldn't see anyone. Hell, she couldn't sense anyone either. But if she used her Sharingan, then maybe she could dash. What are you doing here? Mikoto was on the move the instant that the first word was uttered right behind, jumping back to put some distance between her and whoever else was in here with her Sharingan activated as well. As she landed and came to a stop, Mikoto finally noticed the person that had spoken a few moments earlier, standing right where she had been. The person was wearing what appeared to be a simple-looking black cloak which covered his body entirely. Mikoto already knew the person was a male, if the voice she had heard had been any indication. He sounded pretty young too. What are you doing here? The person asked again. Mikoto weighed her options. If she didn't tell him who she was, they would simply fight it out. And she wasn't sure how she would fare either. It had been years since she had been in actual combat. Her skills were no doubt rusty. But if she did tell him who she was, there was still the chance that they would fight. There was the small chance, however, of this not happening since, well, she had been told to come here. Unless it was all just simply a trap. Finally deciding to go with the latter, Mikoto answered, "I'm Uchiha Mikoto. I was told to come here by Black Zetsu." The male in front of her didn't respond. Instead, he simply took off the hood of the cloak that he currently wore that had been hiding his face, revealing the male to be a man who appeared to be in his early 20s underneath the hood. But Mikoto quickly recognized who the young man in front of her was. How could she not? She had practically raised him since even his own parents had been too ashamed of him for bringing great misfortune to the Uchiha name. Really, that was just pathetic in her opinion. Before the man could stop her, Mikoto was quickly in front of him, wrapping her arms around him in order to engulf him in a hug. "Obito. Just how are you even here?" The 20-something Obito simply chuckled sheepishly as he brought one of his hands to the back of his head, scratching it in an embarrassed manner. "It's a long story, Mikoto." Bringing her head back in order to look at Obito straight in the eyes, Mikoto could see that something had happened to Obito. He looked more mature in a sense. And she didn't talk about the fact that he was now in his 20s. No, it was more like he understood what was going on. He no longer possessed that innocence that he had had the last time that she had seen him all those years ago. "It seems that you two have met." Both Uchiha members looked to the side to see Black Zetsu appearing from the ground, looking at both of them with his single eye as he stood in between them, having emerged completely from the ground. Obito looked at Zetsu with a small grin on his face. "It seems that all went according to plan then." Black Zetsu nodded. "It did. Konoha doesn't suspect a thing." Taking a few steps back from Obito, Mikoto looked at the other two individuals in the room with a questioning look. "Just what exactly is going on here?" Black Zetsu focused his complete attention on her. "Like I've told you, you have been chosen, Mikoto. You've been chosen by Dash. Uchiha Madara," finished Obito, making Mikoto look at him. "He chose you to lead the Uchiha to the glory that we rightly deserve." Of course that was a lie, but Obito wasn't going to tell her the complete truth either. Those had been his instructions, after all. Mikoto looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "Just what do you mean by that?" Obito simply sighed slightly, the act making him look even older than that of what he actually was. "You should already know what I mean, Mikoto. The Uchiha have become nothing more than dogs for the Senju and their followers. We've been turned into nothing more than worthless pieces of trash. We are nothing compared to what the Uchiha clan had once been in the past. Now, we are simply tools for Konoha. That's why the rebellion was planned for. In order to change that. But it was already too late for that. The village saw right through that. Add to the fact that they used your own son for getting rid of us. That's the biggest blow here." Mikoto closed her eyes as she heard this. Of course she already knew all of this to be true. That was why she had agreed to follow Zetsu in the first place. Although she still wasn't convinced that Madara was behind all of this. Just how could he be? Add to the fact that as to how even Obito himself was even here in the first place as well. It seems that you have many questions that you want answered. Mikoto glanced at Black Zetsu, seeing him study her very intently with his single eye. No doubt he was trying to see if she would follow them or not. Mikoto crossed her arms under her chest. "Of course I do. You weren't very informative after all." "Your questions will be answered," stated Obito as he took a step forward. "But first, you have to agree that you will follow us in what Madara planned for you to do." Mikoto looked at Obito with narrowed eyes. "Obito, just what happened to you?" Obito sighed for a second time as he turned his back towards Mikoto. "I grew up. That's all. The world that we're currently living in, I see no hope for it. We, as humans, have created a shinobi world that is ruled by hatred. it continues to spread more and more. And we do nothing to stop it. In fact, we even encourage it. That's just too sad in my mind. Mikoto's eyes were wide in shock as she looked at Obito's back. Just what are you dash? Don't worry, interrupted Obito as he turned his head to look at her, a small smile on his face. I'm not going to do anything insane, if that's what you were thinking. That's just how I feel is all. Besides, it's not my job to do it after all, he finished with a mutter which Mikoto didn't hear. Is that why you're doing this? Asked Mikoto. Obito looked up towards the top of the cave. That's something that I don't even know myself yet. If I could guess, though, I suppose that it has something to do with seeing the end of the current shinobi world that we're currently living in. Now that made Mikoto even more confused. Just what do you mean? Obito didn't respond. Instead, he turned to face her again, extending his arm forward towards her. If you really want to know, then come with us. You'll see what I mean, as well as having the chance to take your revenge on Konoha. Mikoto looked at Obito's extended arm for a moment before looking back at him, taking a hold of his arm with hers, which indicated that she was in. Black Zetsu merely watched all of this with extreme curiosity. I'm starting to see why Madara chose you, Obito. Obito grinned as he saw Mikoto's confirmation. This had been the day of the beginning of their new relationship. The day when they had become partners. The day when they had become a family again. The day when they became like an older sister and her younger brother. The duo, together for many years to come. Flashback, END. The sudden memory caused a single tear to break through Mikoto's resistance, which made her scowl. She couldn't be weak. Not right now. Not when she was so close. Now it just wasn't about her or her goal. It was also about Obito. This is what he had wanted, despite the fact that he himself might not have known that. And she would do everything in her power to succeed. Mikoto suddenly looked up as two blurs flew right past her, heading towards what appeared to be the direction of where the Hokage building was. And due to the fact that she still had her Sharingan activated, Mikoto saw exactly who the two blurs were exactly. One of them, she didn't mind. The other, however. Gripping the handle of her sword more tightly than before, Mikoto took off once more, following the two blurs. Orochimaru was currently one happy man. Well, his sexuality could be called into question at this point. Because, well, he had had a woman's body in the past. But that was beside the point right now. And just why was he happy, you might ask? Well, the answer was simple: he had lied. Not only that, but he had lied and gotten away with it. The second part was the key one here. He already knew of what Danzo had truly wanted when he had initiated his plan of destroying Yuzu. Well, besides Kushina, that is. Or more precisely, the Kyuubi. The other thing that Danzo had wanted was the Fuinjutsu known only to the clan head of the Uzumaki clan. Orochimaru himself already knew where it was, thanks to Kenji. The man had been the clan head's closest friend, after all. But once he had found out what exactly the Fuinjutsu was, Orochimaru had decided to not mess with it. He had already played with death far enough for his tastes. Making a deal with the Shinigami himself was the last thing that Orochimaru would do. Not after messing so much with the Edo Tensei, that is. So he had simply sealed the entrance back again, completely forgetting and leaving that part of his life behind him. At least Danzo hadn't been able to acquire the Fuinjutsu. Who knew what he would have done if he had done so? Orochimaru's tongue slithered out from his mouth as he followed behind Sasuke, jumping from rooftop to rooftop of whatever buildings remained in the village. Where exactly were they going? He didn't know. But it didn't matter. No, the only thing, or rather person, that he cared about was currently in front of him, clearly opened for an attack. Orochimaru didn't have the slightest bit of interest in what was currently happening. That much had been true. But he did care about the effects that would occur afterwards because of what was currently taking place here. Mainly the fact that the elemental nations would be in a state of chaos from the lack of a balance of power that it had possessed before one Uzumaki Naruto had started all of this. And who would be there to fill the void? Orochimaru himself. But before that could take place, however, he still needed to acquire Sasuke's body so that he could finally possess the legendary Sharingan all to himself. And Itachi wasn't around to interfere this time either. With that thought in mind, Orochimaru made his decision. Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise as a white snake wrapped itself tightly around him in midair, quickly biting the left side of his neck. Sasuke could only scream in pain as he roughly landed in the middle of one of the streets on his side, the snake slithering and crawling back to its master. Holding his neck in pain, Sasuke looked at the approaching Orochimaru in anger. "Just what are you doing?" Orochimaru chuckled as he looked at the downed Sasuke. "You and Naruto-kun may have gotten stronger, but it seems that you two still have much to learn of the shinobi world. Sasuke-kun. You let your guard down around me, a shinobi known most for his traitorous nature. And not to mention the fact that Naruto-kun even left me alive after I myself confessed to having played a major role in the destruction of his clan. Really, it's like all he does is point his hatred straight towards this village, forgetting about all the other players. That's just simply childish. My, you seem to think highly of yourself." Orochimaru's eyes narrowed as all around him, the dragon summons from Naruto landed, forming a complete circle around him. Orochimaru scowled. "What is this?" Mukiryu smirked. "You really didn't believe that Naruto would trust you that easily, did you? But it looks like you did. He said it himself, try anything, and you die. And he was waiting for you to try something which you just did. The only reason that he even left you alive was for you to bask in your moment of accomplishment before he stabbed you in the back. It's the same with the other villages. He hasn't forgotten about them. But in this setup, each village is destroyed in the most ironic way. Konoha was destroyed by the same villages that allowed it to destroy Yuzu. And the other villages were destroyed after thinking that they had been victorious by an Uzumaki, making the victory all those years ago meaningless." Orochimaru simply scowled again. "How do you know this?" "Easy. Naruto told me so himself. As well as to keep an eye on you when he delivered one of his comrades to us for safekeeping in our homeland." Enko, thought Orochimaru, realizing who the comrade was. But he hadn't even sensed the animal summonings all around him. How was that even possible? Sensing this, Mukiryu answered, "It's one of our many abilities. After we had caused our fair share of damage to this village, we simply camouflaged ourselves, making us simply invisible. And since we don't possess chakra, even with the Byakugan or Sharingan, you still wouldn't be able to see us. Our camouflage also blocks out our sense as well. Just how do you think that we've managed to stay hidden so far for so many years? Even we want to stretch out our wings in the human world at some periods of time." Orochimaru frowned at the explanation. That was a handy ability all right. It even surpassed that of the Nidaime Tsuchikage. It seemed that he had been careless. Much like with everyone else, he had once again underestimated Naruto. Amaterasu. Orochimaru quickly jumped back as the black flames flared to life on the spot that he had been in. This was due to none other than a kneeling Sasuke, still holding his neck in pain as he tried to burn Orochimaru alive with eternal Manjikyu. Whatever the snake had injected him with, it was clearly messing with his chakra as he couldn't very well control the black flames as he normally would have. Seeing this, Mukiryu blew air through both of his nostrils, almost sending Sasuke flying as the fire dragon was currently standing behind him. Well, a good distance behind him, but it showed just how big the fire dragon was. "Do not interfere, Uchiha. He is our target. We will deal with him." As he landed, Orochimaru couldn't help but to frown once more as he heard this. Even he didn't think that he could handle all of the dragons by himself. A retreat was in order then. But before anything else could take place, another individual made her presence known. And that individual was none other than Mikoto. Quickly appearing right beside her remaining son, Mikoto looked at Orochimaru with narrowed eyes, her Sharingan amplifying the effect of this act. Orochimaru, it's been a long time, hasn't it? Orochimaru for his part merely looked at the woman in confusion. He didn't know who she was. Quickly taking in her facial features and seeing the resemblance of Sasuke within them, realization hit him which made him chuckle. Uchiha Mikoto, it's truly been a long time. I didn't really expect to meet you here of all places because I thought that Itachi had killed you. It seems I was wrong. Not responding to this, Mikoto turned to look at Mukiryu. Dragon-san. Please, I ask you if you would please allow me to kill the snake in front of us with your own 2 hands. Now Mukiryu was greatly surprised at this. An Uchiha with actual manners, surprise of the century. Okay, maybe not, but it was up there all right. Mukiryu merely nodded, showing his acceptance of Mikoto's request. He could tell that there was somewhat of a personal stake happening here, and he could accept that. Orochimaru weighed his options in front of him. For one, he could simply try to escape and not fight Mikoto at all. But if he did that, no doubt that the summonings around him would chase him down. He wasn't entirely sure how good their tracking skills were, but he wasn't going to risk it. And then Mikoto would simply follow behind, with him eventually fighting her in the end. Or he could stay and kill the female Uchiha in front of him and try to find an opening for him to find a way to successfully escape. And with this, Sasuke would try to chase him down in order to avenge his mother, in which he would simply fight the young Uchiha on his own terms, which would successfully give him the greater advantage of capturing Sasuke alive and finally obtain the Sharingan. But the dragons. Either way, he was kind of screwed. But with the latter, the circumstances seemed more favorable. With that in mind, Orochimaru made his decision. Mikoto brought her sword forward, pointing it straight at Orochimaru before it was consumed in flames. I'm not exactly sure as to how exactly you're even here right now, Orochimaru, but I'm not a woman that passes up a golden opportunity when it presents itself to me. I will take advantage of it. Orochimaru for his part gave Mikoto a once-over, almost as if she was some sort of foreign creature that fascinated him. I can say the same to you, Uchiha Mikoto. As far as the world was concerned, you were dead. And yet, you're here today. Alive and well. Interesting how what you think of as reality is nothing more than a lie. Mikoto shrugged. That's the shinobi world for you. Lies and deceit are our specialty. You of all people should know that, Orochimaru. Orochimaru chuckled. Pity that I must kill you. You could have been of great use to me in the future. Mikoto teached. That sounds like something Danzo would say. I guess I can take out my frustration on you since he's not here with us anymore. It will still give me that same warm feeling in my heart as I do so. Sasuke looked towards his mother, still holding his neck in pain. As of right now, he was of no use. And just because he had let down his guard for a single moment. He should have known better. And now, he had paid the price. Orochimaru simply stared at Mikoto for a single moment before he jumped back, landing on the ground on his stomach as well as opening his mouth as wide as possible, which resulted in the appearance of perhaps millions of snakes which quickly began to crawl out of his mouth and towards Mikoto. Mikoto for her part raised her sword in the air before striking it down on the ground, blade piercing straight through the ground. This act resulted in a large torrent of fire bursting into life, quickly heading to intercept the incoming snakes. The snakes and the fire impacted with each other the next moment. In the matter of the next few seconds, all of the snakes were quickly becoming burned to a crisp by the seemingly never-ending torrent of flames. While still on the ground, Orochimaru couldn't help but lick his lips at the sight. Her mastery over the fire style is truly extraordinary. I can see where Sasuke-kun gets his skill from. Of course he was referring to Sasuke's mastery over the black flames, taking it to a level that surpassed even Itachi's own mastery over the flames. It's a shame that I'm not going to get the chance to possess her body. She's really a good candidate. A shame indeed. Orochimaru quickly stood up as Mikoto appeared within the flames, the sword that was surrounded in fire still in hand as she literally flew straight at the snake Sannin. Seeing this, Orochimaru quickly retreated to the side, his feet changing to that of a snake's body so that he could move easier and faster. Mikoto could only scowl as she saw this, her Sharingan spinning to life once again as she stopped at the spot where Orochimaru had been. The flames from before had died off, already having completed their task of burning the snakes to a crisp. Looking around, Orochimaru frowned slightly as he stopped his movements on the other side of the formed circle created by the dragons with the kneeling Sasuke still present in the middle. There's not much room here, and I don't think that these dragons are going to give us any more for that matter. Mikoto struck her sword down on the ground again, quickly forming a set of hand seals as well as inhaling as deeply as she possibly could. Seeing this, Sasuke quickly ducked to the side in an uncontrolled manner. He still didn't have full control of his body yet. Not even the antibodies that he possessed could fight back whatever it was that Orochimaru had injected him with. Well, not as fast as normally that was. Fire style, Gokaku. Orochimaru simply stared at the incoming fireball before it consumed him entirely. Or that's what appeared to happen at least. Mikoto quickly focused her Sharingan on this, not believing for a single moment that Orochimaru had been taken out by something as simple as that. And her prediction turned out to be right as Orochimaru was nowhere in sight after the fireball had died off. Quickly seeing what had happened, Mikoto reacted fast, jumping high into the air with her sword in hand. This action was due to Orochimaru appearing right beneath where she had been from right under the ground, multiple snakes coming out from both of his sleeves. So, she saw that I used the Mogirigakure no Jutsu with her Sharingan, did she? Thought Orochimaru as his tongue slithered out from his mouth. Marvelous. Mikoto looked straight at Orochimaru, throwing her once more flamed sword straight towards him at a fast speed. Orochimaru was quick on the defense, opening his mouth wide open as another snake came out of his mouth. This one, however, was 3 times the size of the previous ones. Due to this, the snake did its job at protecting him by intercepting Mikoto's thrown sword with its open mouth. Orochimaru quickly used his own personal substitution jutsu to escape alive from the flames that quickly burned the whole snake and was coming after him next. Mikoto was quickly on top of him, having recovered her sword as well, which she now used to try to cut him down. And succeeded as well as she cut the snake Sannin in half with a clean slice, his upper body flying to one side while the lower part fell to the ground. Or this would have happened were it not for a multitude of snakes that came out from both halves, quickly meeting with each other and rejoining Orochimaru's body back into one. Now this came as a surprise to Mikoto, which didn't happen very often. Well, this was true before she met Naruto, that is. But now wasn't the time for that. Using their close distance to their advantage, Orochimaru was quick on the offensive. This was shown by his rushing forward towards Mikoto at a quick pace, quickly grabbing a hold of Mikoto's throat. Orochimaru smirked at the angry-looking Mikoto in his grasp. Seems that this it, Mikoto. Mikoto then smirked, which surprised Orochimaru greatly. No, now it's time for you to die once and for all, Orochimaru. Bringing her sword that Orochimaru had forgotten about forward, Mikoto stabbed the snake Sannin right at where his heart should have been, his whole body being engulfed in flames from Mikoto's sword that she had channeled her chakra through. Orochimaru screamed in intense pain as he released Mikoto, but not before said Uchiha had been injured by her own attack due to her close proximity to the attack as well as Orochimaru's hold on her. As she fell to the ground on one knee, there were slight burn marks on her face and arms, but the most serious one being the one around her neck due to Orochimaru having had a hold of her. Orochimaru's scream stopped as he used his substitution jutsu for a second time, lest he be burned alive. Mikoto couldn't help but to scowl as she saw this. Damn persistent bastard. Orochimaru chuckled as he brought one of his hands to face after having completed his substitution jutsu. You really are good, Mikoto. Even without having the Mangekyo, you're giving me quite a fight. You're Itachi's mother, all right. Mikoto tilted her head as she stood up. I don't know what to say really. Was that a compliment? Because it sure as hell didn't feel like one to me. It just made me feel all creepy and disgusted inside. Orochimaru's amusement didn't fade at this, however. In fact, he appeared to become even more amused if anything. Bringing his hand back to his side, Orochimaru said, "It's amusing to watch you struggle. No matter what, I'm going to win here." Mikoto smirked. Even if you do win, our little dragon pals here are just going to kill you afterwards. Mikoto tilted her head behind him and all around her, indicating towards the watching summonings. Orochimaru frowned slightly at the reminder. Yes, that was the big problem here. That was the whole reason that he was even fighting at the moment. If it weren't for them, he would be dash. Enten, Susanoo Kagutsuchi. Orochimaru looked down at his chest to see a blade made entirely of the black flames of Amaterasu sticking out. Looking behind him, Orochimaru saw a panting and kneeling Sasuke who had his Susanoo activated if barely. It seemed that keeping it active as well as managing to control the black flames was taking a heavy toll on him, if his heavy panting was any indication. Orochimaru frowned as his body began to be entirely burned by the black flames. You. Sasuke smirked slightly. I'm not out completely, you bastard. You should know that I have built up an immunity to your poisons thanks to you. But it seems that you've forgotten that, haven't you? Orochimaru scowled before opening his mouth, his real body coming out and abandoning the one that he had been using up to this point as said body fell to the ground, continuing on being burned by the black flames. Sasuke frowned at this as his Susanoo disappeared. Now there is something that I didn't want to see again. Mikoto for her part brought her sword forward again, running straight towards Orochimaru despite the fact that she was greatly surprised at seeing Orochimaru's real body. The white snakes that made up Orochimaru's real body sprang to life, quickly shooting forward in order to intercept the approaching Mikoto. In response, Mikoto raised her sword before she began to cut down the incoming snakes, all the while continuing on her way towards Orochimaru. Said individual didn't care about this in the slightest at the moment, however. Instead, he focused on Sasuke. It was now or never. Why wait until later when he could simply take Sasuke's body now? And with the eternal Mangekyo at his disposal, Orochimaru was sure that he could find a way to deal with Naruto's dragon summons. Reaching this conclusion, Orochimaru quickly slithered his way towards Sasuke who was still not at his 100% yet. The white snakes on his body continued to stall Mikoto who was beginning to get frustrated. Sasuke. Said Uchiha gritted his teeth in anger as Orochimaru lunged at him, using whatever strength he had to summon his Susanoo ribcage. He couldn't do any more than that right now. But it proved to be effective enough as Orochimaru slammed into the protective barrier but wasn't able to penetrate it. Kenjutsu, Kasai Dansu. Behind Orochimaru, Mikoto jumped into the air, quickly spinning which caused the flames on her sword to engulf around her which took the form of a small tornado. Said tornado quickly burned anything in its path as it descended down to the ground towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru screamed in pain once more because of this before a purplish gas began to appear around the area, quickly surrounding the forms of the three shinobi. As the fire-based tornado disappeared around her, Mikoto couldn't help but to frown as she saw the gas all around her. What is this? Already knowing what it was, Sasuke screamed, "Don't inhale it, it's very poisonous." But it was too late for that. Mikoto quickly fell to her knees because of this as the reformed snake body of Orochimaru appeared above her. It's over, Mikoto. Mikoto could only scowl as she felt the movement of her body leave her, much like with Sasuke. Now this was something that she really wasn't expecting. But who would? No one had seen Orochimaru's real body before and had lived to tell the tale. Well, except for both Sasuke and Kabuto, with the latter now being dead. Seeing all of this, Mikaryu was prepared to step in. These were his summoner's allies, after all. And while he might not be too fond of the Uchiha clan, he still had values that he followed strictly. But Mikoto beat him to it. Dragon-san. Do whatever you have to. Don't hold back because of us. Understanding began to hit Mikaryu as he realized what Mikoto was implying, which confused him greatly. Also understanding, Sasuke smirked to himself as he deactivated his Susanoo ribcage. It didn't matter to him at any rate. He had already accomplished his goal. And while not being finished yet, he knew that his old teammate would do it for him. Orochimaru for his part couldn't help but to look all around him in what appeared to be anxiety. Not only that, but he couldn't use jutsu anymore. Not that he had a lot in his current arsenal either, since his old sensei took his arms away from him 3 years ago. There wasn't enough time to complete the ritual to take possession of Sasuke's body either. His only remaining option was to retreat, which was a fancy way of saying that he needed to get the hell out of here. But before he could try anything, Orochimaru screamed in more pain as the energy sword from Sasuke's Susanoo in its basic form pierced him right in the middle of his body, keeping him tightly rooted on the spot. Looking at Sasuke, Mikoto began to try reasoning with him. What are you doing? You can still get out of here and live. You dash. It won't be worth it, interrupted Sasuke with a shake of his head. I won't have anyone here anymore. Not you, not Itachi. My purpose will also be gone. All of this, Sasuke looked all around him. This was it. It was what I had been waiting to see, for what they did to us. I don't care if it's not justified. This is what I wanted. But now, I want to be with you, Ka-san. With Itachi. Heh, maybe we will all see each other in the afterlife. Who knows, he finished with a small smirk. Mikoto simply lowered her head, not willing to show the world the tears that she could no longer hold back. Sasuke was right. Perhaps that was the better option. They could be reunited. She, Itachi, Sasuke, and Obito as well. Orochimaru for his part struggled against the energy sword, trying to break free. Damn it, he could not die here. He still had so many plans that he had to carry out. The elemental nations could be his. And then he could finally focus on trying to solve the mystery of the nature of life. Looking straight at Mikaryu, Sasuke nodded at him. Mikaryu for his part simply looked Sasuke straight in the eyes. You're not half bad, Uchiha. Still messed up like the rest of your clan was, but you're all right in my book. Sasuke merely grinned. Looking at his fellow dragons, Mikaryu nodded at them before they all focused their attacks straight at where the 3 shinobi were. Wait for us, Itachi, Obito. Thought Mikoto to herself as an image of the two appeared in her mind before being replaced by those of both Naruto and Kushina. It's up to you two, now. Mikoto closed her eyes as the attacks were fired from each dragon from all sides around her, one final tear leaving her. Farewell. The attacks hit with Sasuke deactivating his Susanoo at the final second, causing a major explosion. Kushina stopped on her tracks as she felt a powerful explosion nearby. Jumping on top of one of the many rooftops in the area, Kushina saw what appeared to be the form of dragons gathered together in a circle a distance away from her. She already knew that they were Naruto's summonings now. Still, what exactly were they doing? Kushina shook her head before jumping down from the rooftop and to the street below, continuing on her way to find Naruto. She had already encountered both Black Zetsu and White Zetsu, who told her where Naruto currently was. And as to what he was doing, mainly fighting Shin. Which was why she needed to hurry. She needed to be there. But for some odd reason that she could not understand, Kushina felt as if something horrible had just happened. But what could that be? Finally putting that in the back of her mind, she continued on her way towards the Hokage building. In the middle of the now lifeless area in the western section of the village, another battle was currently taking place at the moment. The only bystander at the moment was Fuka, who was watching the proceedings with great interest. And who wouldn't? Really? Both Mito and Tsunade clashed with each other, the former being slightly faster than the latter as they continued to trade blows with each other. That was exactly correct. Mito was fighting her granddaughter fists to fists. Now, to anyone else this might seem suicidal unless the other person fighting Tsunade was the Raikage. Well, that person would be dead wrong. And this had to do with Mito's diamond that she had on her own forehead, just like her granddaughter. Markings much like with Tsunade were present on her face as she continued to fight her granddaughter. Now, to understand as to why Mito was even lasting against Tsunade in this type of fight, a little bit of explanation was in order. Mainly as to how Mito's Fuinjutsu that was present in her forehead in the form of a diamond fitted into all of this. And the answer was simple. Much like with Tsunade's own technique, Mito's cells were duplicated in any case of injury so that any injury inflicted could be healed instantly. But the difference was that the new cells created were enhanced beyond the ordinary from their original counterparts. And this was due to Mito stimulating the cells with her chakra in order for them to increase their productivity and function way beyond the maximum. Of course, this came at a price. And that was the death of the cells much faster than originally because of the enhancement. This would lead to the eventuality of the death of the user at a fast rate as well. Well, if the user wasn't one from a clan such as the Uzumaki, that was. Mito's body was much stronger and more resilient than that of the average human being. As such, her cells were much stronger as well and could last longer because of this. This gave her a lot more extra time as a result. Tsunade could only grunt in pain as she was pushed back by a strong kick to her gut, courtesy of Mito. Holding her gut in pain, Tsunade looked at her grandmother in anger and in what appeared to be sadness. "You're not going to change your mind, are you?" Mito tilted her head to the side. "Do you really believe that something like that is possible? Especially this late into the game?" Mito then spread her arms around, indicating to all around them. "Look at this. This is what I've been waiting for so many years. And to finally see it accomplished with my own eyes, you couldn't begin to understand how I feel, Tsunade." Tsunade frowned. "Yeah, perhaps you're right. But if there is something that I learned from you when I was a kid, it is that you must have faith in whatever it is that you choose to do. That is the most important thing." Tsunade stood up straighter as the diamond on her forehead began to glow, the markings on her face beginning to spread all around her body. "Well, this is what I have chosen. I choose to fight for the village, to give it a chance to redeem itself. But do not destroy it. That is what I believe is the right course of action." Looking at her granddaughter in front of her, Mito couldn't help the smile that appeared on her face. "You do take after Hashirama a lot more than what you think, Tsunade. I'm sure that he would be proud of you." But then the smile disappeared. "But that is no longer of importance. Not anymore. I will remove anyone that tries to stop me from achieving my goal. The only reason that I hadn't killed the last 2 times we met was to see if you would change your mind. But that seems like a moot point now. You have truly made your final decision on this matter. I guess my hands are tied on this now too." Tsunade simply narrowed her eyes. "I could say the same to you." Both kunoichi locked eyes before they rushed at each other again. Fist against fist. Foot against foot. Hell, head against head. Both women were using the most extreme levels of their strength, each trying to defeat the other. It was an even fight really. While Mito was faster than Tsunade, Tsunade was obviously stronger than Mito in physical strength. But there was an advantage that Tsunade had secured a few moments prior, and it was becoming apparent. Her wounds were now healing at an even faster rate than before. Seeing this, Mito frowned before she decided to end the confrontation and jumped back to put some distance between her and Tsunade. But Tsunade wasn't going to allow her to recover. So instead, she pressed on, rushing straight at Mito, who had just enough time to bring both of her arms in front of her in order to block the devastating punch from the blonde Senju. And it did for the most part, but it couldn't defend the redhead from the strength packed behind the punch. Because of this, Mito was pushed back from the hit before she used chakra in her feet to stop herself, sticking to the ground as if her feet were glued to it. Mito frowned as she looked at her calm granddaughter. Something had changed with her, all right. She seemed extremely more powerful now than the last two other encounters when they had fought. Tsunade cracked all of her knuckles on her hand before she rushed at Mito without a word once more, using the momentum that she had been building up to this point to her advantage. Mito took a step back as she readied herself. All right then, no more fighting her with just taijutsu. I will eventually lose if I keep doing that. And that was something that Mito would not accept. Not now. Not when she was so close to achieving her goal. Tsunade pushed all the chakra that she could to her feet, which sent her flying forward towards Mito, aiming another set of punches at her. Mito for her part merely ducked back, bending backwards as Tsunade went past above her. Using this to her advantage, Mito quickly grabbed hold of Tsunade's wrist from the arm that she had extended in order to punch the lights out of her grandmother. Mito then bent forward again, bringing Tsunade with her as she swung her to the other side. Tsunade grunted in pain as she landed on the ground on her back with a powerful thud noise. Tsunade quickly stood up before she fell down on the ground on one knee as a sudden wave of weakness hit her. For some reason, Tsunade felt as if her strength was being sucked right out of her. Seeing this, Mito smirked. It was already taking effect, it seemed. Seeing the smirk on her grandmother's face, Tsunade scowled as she tried to stand but found the act to be very tiresome. What did you do? Mito shrugged as she took a step forward. You really should be more perceptive to your surroundings, Tsunade. Or did you really think that I would fight you in brute strength alone? Even with my own seal activated, I am no match for you in that regard. Tsunade frowned. What are you saying? Mito sighed. Just look at your wrist, will you? Doing so, Tsunade's eyes widened as she found a mark on the shape of a swirl present, glowing as well. When she grabbed my wrist. That's when she placed it on me, thought Tsunade in realization. She didn't need to ask as to what the seal did either. She could already tell as she felt even more weaker than before. It was sucking the chakra out of her. It's over, Tsunade, said Mito calmly as she looked at the still kneeling Tsunade. You can't win this. Tsunade merely closed her eyes before she stood up on shaking legs as she felt the seal on her wrist consume more chakra from her. It seemed that the more physical movements that she did, the faster the seal would take her chakra from her. And for someone like her, that was devastating. Opening her eyes and looking straight at Mito, Tsunade knew that she would only have one shot at what she was planning on doing. But she did have something to her advantage here, and that was her grandmother's cockiness. And Tsunade would exploit that to its maximum capability. Maybe even beyond that. Bringing both of her hands in front of her, they began to glow a hazy blue which completely surrounded both of them. The Chakura no Mezu, thought Mito as she saw this. So, she'll go down fighting, will she? Heh, I wouldn't want it any other way. Feeling even more of her chakra leaving her, Tsunade quickly rushed at Mito, both of her hands in front of her and ready to attack her grandmother. The seal on Mito's forehead began to glow before her entire body began to be completely engulfed in her own chakra, much like with Tsunade's hands. Mito was pushing all of her cells to the limit at the moment and knew that she would only have a minute at best in this form. She was in the same position as her granddaughter, it would seem. Both women rushed at the other, each trying to achieve her own objective, which was completely the opposite of the other. And that was why they both intended to win here. No matter the cost. Time slowed down as the two kunoichi were less than a foot apart from the other, each one with her right arm extended forward. Tsunade's right palm was brought forward at the same time as Mito's own right palm. It seemed that they were both using a similar technique here. Tsunade focused all of her remaining chakra on her right palm, the hazy blue-colored chakra around her hand becoming even more powerful than before and ready to penetrate Mito's chakra defense. Mito for her part had her right hand opened, changing it from how she had had it before at the last moment before it impacted with Tsunade's left shoulder. Inside her opened hand, the hazy blue chakra took the form of a spiral ball of energy, much like with the Rasengan. Both of the attacks hit at the same time, causing an explosion to surround both of the fighting kunoichi. Said explosion also caused a cloud of dust to overtake the area, preventing anyone from seeing what the outcome was. Fuka, still watching the fight from the side, shielded her face from the incoming debris made of rocks that had been created from the explosion. Mito, did you win? The only true question now remaining here. And that was, just who had won? The cloud of dust began to disperse after a few seconds, uncovering the sight that it had been shielding from the rest of the world. And that sight was that of the unmoving forms of both Mito and Tsunade, both still standing and with each still having her right arm extended forward. It seemed that they had both been successful with their attacks, if the wound on both of their left shoulders was any indication. Blood was trickling down from each wound on both women, a small puddle having formed underneath them which would no doubt eventually combine with the other. Mito's chakra that had surrounded her had disappeared, as well as the chakra that had surrounded Tsunade's right hand. This sight held for just a moment longer before both grandmother and granddaughter alike fell down to the ground on their knees, both of their foreheads touching against the other. Mito panted heavily as she looked at her granddaughter with an also heavily panting Tsunade looking right back at her, their eyes meeting with each other. Mito then lowered head to the ground as more blood began to come out of her mouth, her coughing successfully puking it out. This was soon mirrored by Tsunade. It seemed that the activation of their respective seals was finally taking its toll on each of them. Not to mention the seal that Mito placed on Tsunade which had successfully consumed all of the blonde Senju's chakra. They were both out. It seemed that their fight was at an end, with it ending in a draw. But Fuka was still there. And said redhead wasn't about to let anything happen to Mito either. She took a step forward towards the downed kunoichi before she halted, the reason being Mito turning her eyes towards her direction with a small shake of her head. It seemed that Mito didn't want her to interfere, even now. Turning back to look at Tsunade, Mito could only grin despite the pain that started to appear all around her body. Her cells had reached their limit, it would seem. She didn't have much time. I must hand it to you, Tsunade. You put up more of a fight than I expected. But now, it's all over. Tsunade painted more as she looked at her grandmother in return. I wouldn't say that. You can't fight anymore, just like me. This is a draw. Mito smirked as some of her blood oozed down from her lips. I wasn't talking about this. You might have stopped me, but you're forgetting that I'm not alone. I might not be able to finish this, but at least I know that the others will. And that's more than enough for me now. Tsunade gritted her teeth in anger at this. She knew that Mito was right. And now, in her heavily injured form, she knew that she wouldn't be able to do a single thing to stop the others that were also trying to destroy the village. Mainly Naruto. She might have not lost the battle here, but she definitely lost the war. Mito then did something that completely shocked Tsunade to her core. Despite the extreme pain and difficulty that the act brought to her, Mito engulfed Tsunade in a tight hug, bringing both of her arms around her granddaughter's back. Tsunade's eyes were wide in shock. What are you dash? This is it, interrupted Mito with a smile which Tsunade could not see. We're both moving to the next life, together. Realization hit Tsunade as a complicated array of seals appeared all around Mito's body before the symbols that made the seal began to glow. But despite this, Tsunade tried nothing to stop it. She knew that it was over. Even if she did by some miracle get out of this alive, she wouldn't be able to do anything to stop any of these events any longer. It was at this moment that Senju Tsunade finally gave up. But she didn't care. She was exhausted from all the crap that she had had to put up to get to this point. But now, it seemed that it was finally going to be over. Her long-awaited rest. That was what she was looking towards now. So with that thought in mind, Tsunade also embraced her grandmother in a similar fashion. They might not have been a family before this, but now in death, it seemed that it had finally happened, despite the messed up circumstances that it was happening in. But Tsunade was content with that. Looking towards the rock-still Fuka, Mito sent her one final smile before uttering 3 simple words. Live, Fuka, live. The symbols glowed to their maximum before the seal finally did what it was meant to do. And that was for it to kill its user by blowing up, causing an explosion to occur which surrounded the small area around Mito, including Tsunade. Fu could only watch with wide eyes as she looked up towards the sky to see both Naruto and Shin fighting in mid-air, one with a sword and the other with bare hands. But it was obvious to anyone watching that Naruto had the advantage thanks to the Saikatsu Gakari, something which infuriated Shin to no end. A few moments later, Shin was sent flying down towards the ground with a massive cut running down his chest towards his stomach. A massive cry of pain could be heard as he landed in the ground with a large impact, creating a small crater because of this. The markings from his curse mark began to glow as he looked at the landing Naruto with pure hatred in his Rinnegan eyes. You! Naruto brought his sword forward, the crimson energy from the Saikatsu Gakari quickly engulfing him completely as well as the said sword. It's time to bring this to an end. I'm sure that you agree with me on that at least, correct? Shin smirked as he stood up, the curse mark that ran across his whole body still glowing. Yeah, I can say that much at least. Fu gulped slightly as she felt the atmosphere around her beginning to change, a massive power surrounding the whole area. But she would not leave. She would stay here, see things through to the end. Just like Neji had done. Deep in Naruto's subconscious, Kurama could only close his eyes as he felt the approaching energy from the rest of his brothers. Despite knowing what was going to happen as a result, Kurama let out a grin. It's almost time. Things would finally come to their final conclusion.